At battle sites all around the world, archaeologists are exploring lost ships, subs, and aircraft from a critical but much misunderstood year. 1945.
There was no guarantee that World War II was going to end in 1945. The noose was tightening both in the Pacific and in Europe. But what was needed were breakthroughs. Breakthroughs that had yet to happen.
Hitler still controls Germany, and his scientists refine terrifying new weapons. Japan promises to fight on to the bitter end. Surrender remains unthinkable.
It was a dilemma for American decision makers to figure out how to bring this war to an end.
What can draining four wrecks, thousands of miles apart, reveal about the decisive final months of World War II?
It's not as if the war ended quietly. It was a year of incredible violence. It was a year that shook the world.
January 1945. Soviet forces push into Nazi-held territory, triggering a crisis for German civilians.
Behind the German front, there were millions of German civilians. Many of these refugees simply feared to be overrun by the Russians.
For many, the only possible route to safety is by sea. What can a haunted wreck below the icy Baltic reveal about a plan to rescue 1 million refugees? On January 23, 1945, the German Navy, or Kriegsmarine, launches a plan to rescue soldiers and civilians, Operation Hannibal.
Not only civilian ships, but also troop transports were used for bringing German civilians into safety.
The 550-foot-long General von Steuben sets sail from the German-occupied port of Pillau on February 9th. She's carrying around 5,000 men, women, and children, all attempting to flee the Soviet army. But just 13 hours later, the Steuben is at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Now, an elite Polish dive team wants to find out what happened to her. They're heading to the Steuben's last known position, 40 miles off the coast of Poland. The Steuben lies in waters 230 feet deep. In the year-round chill of the Baltic Sea, wrecks here are unusually well preserved. So there's a good chance that evidence of her terrible fate will still survive. But it's a dangerous mission.
To dive on Steuben, you must be really experienced diver. It's absolutely dark because in Baltic Sea on the 70 meters it's always dark, and it's always cold, it's 4 degrees. So if you have any problem with your suit, you are in really trouble.
Each diver will have just 30 minutes at the wreck site. Any longer could prove deadly. A shape appears. The distinctive windows of the Steuben's promenade deck.
I have this feeling that I go back in the time. Some of the things were untouched for 75 years. This was some special journey around this ship. Fantastic.
Soon, time is up for the divers. But armed with the data they've collected, we can do something extraordinary. Parting the waters of the Baltic. From deep below the icy sea, a gigantic wreck emerges in near perfect condition. All along her starboard side, the distinctive row of windows. And a vital clue. A hole below the waterline. What could have caused it? In 1945, the Baltic is packed with sea mines. Does the Steuben strike one of them?
Any vessel could be a target. So a big part of what the Kriegsmarine would have been doing that time was to make sure that their shipping lanes were swept. And so the swept passages, as they were known, were then open for the ships to move around.
But analysis of the Steuben's route and final resting place proves that she stays within cleared sea lanes. So a mine looks unlikely. Returning to the drained wreck reveals fresh clues. Near the bow, a second hole, 68 feet from the first. It's unmistakable.
Looking at where the damage pattern is on the ship, it's quite likely that the ship has been torpedoed. If you're on a submarine and you're attacking a large ship like a liner, what you want to do is to put your torpedoes into what is called a spread, to give yourself the best opportunity for hitting the target.
The two blast holes carry the telltale signs of torpedo attack. The Baltic is packed with Soviet subs hunting for German targets. It's likely that one of them deliberately attacks the Steuben. But firing on a passenger ship is deeply controversial and possibly a war crime. Returning to the drained wreck reveals some game-changing evidence. Clearly visible on the aft part of the deck, two large anti-aircraft guns. This ship is heavily armed. The Nazis destroy huge quantities of military records in the final months of the war. But in his quest to uncover the truth, maritime historian Jan Witt tracks down the last surviving documents about the Steuben.
Here we see the Steuben in her heyday as a luxury passenger vessel, a real beauty. This image shows The Steuben, after she was taken over by the Kriegsmarine as a transport vessel, the painting has changed from a clear, white, shiny painting to this dazzle painting, camouflaging her silhouette.
Under the rules of war, the Steuben is no longer an innocent ocean liner.
Being a simple troop transport in the service of the Kriegsmarine, from the point of international law of war, she was fair game.
By piecing together all the evidence, the tragic final hours of this ill-fated ship come clearly into focus. A massive crowd of refugees reaches Pillau in early February. They know the Steuben may be one of the last ships out. Although she's already crowded with soldiers, the Steuben's captain takes pity and allows over 1,000 civilians to join them. But this simple act of humanity has appalling consequences. Just before 1 a.m., while many people are sleeping, the first torpedo hits the starboard bow of the Steuben. A few seconds later, another explosion rocks the ship. As a second torpedo detonates.
You're a civilian. You've been pushed to a waterfront in the face of an advancing, vengeful army. You go out to sea, suddenly there's an explosion, the lights go out, and the ship begins to sink. It had to be absolute sheer terror.
In the freezing Baltic waters, fewer than 700 of the 5,000 passengers survive. Nearly 1 million German civilians do manage to escape the Soviet army. But Operation Hannibal cost the Germans 161 vessels and over 30,000 lives. Allied troops are now closing in on Berlin, but Hitler refuses to surrender. To turn his fortunes around, he puts his faith in secret weapons. What can a mysterious wreck off the coast of Norway reveal about his final throw of the dice? In 2003, a Norwegian Navy survey ship is searching for wrecks. 2 miles off the coast of Fea Island, it detects something surprising on the seabed, around 500 feet down. A crew explores the site with a remotely operated vehicle.
We're about 30 meters off the seabed.
After a short search, the ROV spots something unexpected. The unmistakable outline of a submarine. To understand what kind of submarine it is and why it's lying on the floor of the North Sea, we can now use new data to drain the seabed dry. The larger sections of the wreck bear the telltale signs of a German U-boat. But this U-boat is far bigger than any found in these waters before. Its remains are spread across two separate areas, as if torn apart. Putting all the pieces together reveals the scale of this massive submarine, a full 287 feet long. What is this monster of the deep?
If you find a large German U-boat, you can be quite sure you found a Type 9 boat. There were special constructed long-range U-boats for long-range operations.
Type 9D U-boats can carry an incredible 252 tons of cargo. And they have gigantic fuel tanks, allowing them to travel all the way around the world without refueling. The Germans build only 30 of these monster subs. Can that help the team identify exactly which U-boat this one is? Returning to the drained wreck reveals a new clue. Lying broken away near the stern of the sub, a snorkel. When extended, it brings air from the surface to the sub's engines, allowing it to remain underwater and undetected for longer periods of time. Jan Witt turns to wartime records and discovers that only 5 Type 9D U-boats are ever fitted with snorkels. He's then able to piece together the fate of each. 2 of the subs survive the war, and 2 others sink in other waters. That leaves only one unaccounted for, U-864, a very significant submarine. War records reveal that in February 1945, U-864 is on a top-secret mission, bound for Japan as part of a plot called Operation Caesar to give Imperial forces an advantage against America.
Operation Caesar was the desperate attempt of Germany strengthening their Japanese allies, helping them with fighting their war in the Pacific against the British and the Americans.
So exactly what is this giant sub carrying to Japan? To find out, the team returns to the ocean floor. This time, they focus on the keel section of the wreck and find something intriguing. 6 cylinder-shaped metallic canisters. They're partially buried under the sediment and appear badly corroded. Any identifying marks are long gone.
Yeah, go ahead, Dick.
So the team sends down an ROV to retrieve one and find out what secrets it contains.
It's on the seabed and it looks good.
Lab analysis of its contents reveals large amounts of mercury. A liquid metal that's key to building the bomb switches and detonators that Japan needs. But that's not all.
On board U-864, there were top secret new technologies the Germans had developed in the war, like modern jet engines. So it was kind of technological transfer to Japan.
In 1945, the Nazis are far ahead in the development of jet engine technology, which allows them to build the Me-262, the fastest operational jet fighter in the sky. But the prototype engine sent to Japan never arrive. They remain inside U-864 at the bottom of the North Sea. So what prevents this sub and its top secret cargo from reaching Japan? Returning to the drained wreck reveals the bow and aft parts of the submarine, lying 100 feet apart on the ocean floor. Only one thing can explain this.
When you look at the wreck of U-864, it's very evident that it's been torpedoed. I've looked at a number of submarine wrecks over the years that have been torpedoed, and they generally share a very common feature of being blown completely in half.
Where does this torpedo come from? The team investigates maritime war records and discovers there are no Allied torpedo planes or attack boats in the area. But there is a British submarine, HMS Venturer. The Norwegians haven't just found an important missing U-boat. They've found the casualty of a unique underwater battle. Now, by combining the scan data and the military records of two countries, it's possible to recreate the final dramatic hours of U-864. On the 9th of February, British codebreakers alert HMS Venturer to a U-boat in the vicinity.
Venturer hears the U-boat approaching using its hydrophones, and from that point, the hunt begins.
The standard way to torpedo an enemy sub is to wait for it to surface. But the U-864 never comes up.
Venturer tracks U-864 for over an hour until it maneuvers itself into an optimum firing position.
The Venturer's commander knows the approximate course of the enemy sub, but hitting it underwater is nearly impossible. Using 3D targeting, he fires a spread of torpedoes and listens for a result.
It seems that it was the last torpedo of the four that were fired that struck U-864 right under the conning tower and blew it in half.
U-864 sinks to the bottom of the icy North Sea, taking 75 men and Hitler's secret technology with her.
This is the first time a submerged submarine takes out another submerged submarine with torpedoes. So it's a historic moment in the history of submarine warfare.
Hitler's attempt to help Japan is halted by an extraordinary underwater game of cat and mouse.
The Mercury reaching Japan would have given them opportunity to build more caps, firing mechanisms, fuses. But the jet engine and the rocket, had the Japanese gotten that technology and been able to activate it, it could have been a game changer.
The loss of the latest Nazi technology is a major blow to Japan's war effort. Her generals turn instead to a new and disturbing form of attack. Does the shattered wreck of an American warship contain secrets from these terrible and deadly days? In the Pacific, a brutal amphibious war still rages. But island by island, the Allies are closing in.
By April 1945, as the U.S. and its allies push closer to Japan, the Japanese are desperate. They're surrounded.
the Allies are poised to attack Japan itself by invading Okinawa. But the Emperor's government vows to defend the island at any cost.
For the Japanese, the American invasion of Okinawa was an existential moment. This would be the first time in the war that an American boot set foot on soil that the Japanese considered part of the homeland.
A U.S. naval force of 1,000 warships moves towards Okinawa. Among them, the USS Emmons, a Gleaves-class destroyer. She's a fast, maneuverable warship whose job is to protect the larger vessels in a fleet. Armed with 5-inch guns, she packs a powerful punch. The Emmons is part of a forward line of ships positioned between Okinawa and Japan.
The Americans dispatched 16 small destroyers out to what they called a picket radar position, 40 to 70 miles beyond the fleet that was invading the island. And their job was to identify incoming Japanese threats.
These heavily armed, radar-equipped ships should be able to spot the enemy coming and defend themselves. But in an unexpected body blow, the Emmons sinks with 137 casualties. What goes wrong? In August of 2000, close to the Emmons' last reported position, local fishermen spot oil in the water. The Japanese Coast Guard sends a team to investigate. Diving soon reveals a large wreck. Could this be the long-lost destroyer? As the East China Sea begins to part, it allows light to fall once again on one of the most ferocious battlegrounds of the Pacific War. She's 348 feet long, a perfect match for a World War II American destroyer. Nearby lies a paravane, a device for sweeping mines. It leaves little room for doubt. The USS Emmons carries exactly this type of equipment and is in this area when she sinks. She bears signs of an attack from all sides. But from what? Is a Japanese warship responsible?
The Japanese Navy had very few arrows left in its quiver. It had one large battleship, the Yamato, and a few modified battleships that didn't have enough fuel to get to sea anyway. So the Japanese Navy was not really going to interfere with this landing.
If a battleship doesn't sink her, can other evidence from the wreck prove what does? Around 50 feet from the Emmons lie the remains of an engine from a plane. The rest of the aircraft is completely destroyed. Its joystick, the only other identifiable part. The construction of the engine shows the wreckage belongs to a Japanese plane. But it's not a fighter or a bomber. It's a two-seater Type 98 reconnaissance plane. How could such a non-combat aircraft attack a ship in the US fleet? The answer is that the Japanese are now employing a new and terrifying style of warfare. By 1945, most of Japan's greatest air aces are dead. So the country quickly trains a new generation of pilots.
These pilots were not experienced, seasoned, veteran pilots. They had been rushed through a flight training school. And look at these, they're children, they're kids, 15, either college age or high school. And it's just incredible.
The Japanese military doesn't need to train these young men for very long.
These pilots, these novice pilots, can maybe fly the plane, but that's it. Therefore, one strategy that was devised was to use suicide attacks, so-called kamikaze attacks.
Kamikaze attacks shock the U.S. Navy, cause huge losses, and spread terror.
What they talked about was the abject fear that they felt as these planes would come out in large numbers and come on in at you. And it kept going day after day, hour after hour. It made war, as they got closer to Japan, sheer hell.
Now, using insights from the drained wreck, along with documents from the time, we can reveal in detail exactly what happened to the USS Emmons. On April 6, 1945, the Japanese used hundreds of aircraft to launch the largest kamikaze operation ever, called Floating Chrysanthemum. At 5:32 p.m., the first wave of kamikazes approached the Emmons. She defends herself with everything she's got, but is soon overwhelmed. In total, 5 suicide planes slam into the ship, fatally wounding her.
60 sailors on the Emmons died that day, and another 77 were badly wounded. Others were plucked from the sea. It must have been horrific.
Between April and June of 1945, Japan's kamikaze campaign reaches its terrifying peak. More than 2,500 suicide attacks destroy or damage over 400 warships.
The Americans are looking at this and they're saying they're not going to stop. This is horrific. What's going to happen when they get to the shores of Japan?
The Allies need to find a response. Can a wreck off a remote Pacific island help explain a new plan to stop the kamikaze and end the war? By May of 1945, the war in Europe is over, but Japan remains determined to fight to the bitter end.
Their idea was that they would make the Americans pay so much in blood and treasure for so long that the Americans would somehow tire of their losses and agree to negotiate and bring this war finally to an end.
Preparations are taking place for a land invasion of Japan. Allied planners fear the worst.
The numbers are run, and it's estimated that this is going to be an epic slaughter that will last and last potentially for over a year.
The U.S. government faces the prospect of losing 500,000 men, so turns instead to a new weapon: One they hope will win the war without the need for a ground invasion. The B-29 Superfortress. The Superfortress can carry twice the payload of any other American long-range bomber. And crucially, its huge fuel tanks give it a 3,250-mile range, allowing it to strike deep into Japan, from bases many hundreds of miles away. But there's a problem. These high-tech planes are dropping out of the sky at a frightening rate. Can finding the wreck of one of these iconic aircraft tell us why? In July of 2016, a U.S. survey boat investigates a tantalizing object in a remote part of the Pacific Ocean. It's 1,500 miles off the coast of Japan, not far from Tinian Island. In World War II, this place is the biggest airport in the world, home to over 400 B-29s that fly bombing raids against Japan from here. So, has the team stumbled upon the remains of one of these planes? Whatever it is, it's deep, over 1,000 feet down. So the investigation team sends an ROV to take a look.
We have discovered some debris on the seafloor in front of us.
Part of an airplane.
The ROV illuminates some highly distinctive wreckage. There's only one plane this can be.
Pretty much as 29 wing. Two.
How does it end up here? Draining away the waters of the Pacific Ocean allows a closer look. The wing emerges, glinting in the daylight. After 75 years on the seabed, it's remarkably well preserved. The plane is resting upside down. Its landing gear is retracted, and there are no signs of any bombs. 3 of the 4 engines are still attached, but the rest of the plane is missing. What could cause such catastrophic damage? Maritime archaeologist Megan Licklider-Munden has expert knowledge of these planes.
The pieces of the B-29 are relatively close to each other. That in itself suggests that it was a breakup that happened on the surface rather than an aircraft exploding in the air and all of the pieces have a ways to travel before they even get to the surface of the water.
Using sonar data and B-29 blueprints, we can flip this mighty superfortress right side up. Revealing that all 3 engines have a similar pattern of damage on their underside. What kind of crash could cause this?
All of the engines that we could see were all crushed. That leads us to believe that when this airplane came down, it made a pancake-style landing, which means that it came down pretty much horizontally.
It's clear evidence that this bomber does not suffer a catastrophic loss of control. It's making a deliberate attempt to ditch at sea.
So our wreck is about right here. You can see that it's directly off of the flight path for Tinian's North Field.
The crash site is only 3 miles from the end of the runway. This B-29 never made it to Japan. In fact, it looks like she only briefly made it into the air. But why does a plane costing billions of dollars to develop crash on takeoff? Answers may lie in the drained wreck. Draining the Pacific has revealed clues to the tragic fate of a B-29 Superfortress bomber.
This airplane had a rough landing.
The team needs more evidence to find out what's gone wrong. This time, they focus on the aircraft's massive engines. It leads them to a clue. On one of the engines, the exhaust stacks are heavily corroded and pitted, signs of fire damage. But would a fire in only one of its 4 engines bring down this sophisticated bomber?
Completes a pre-flight checklist.
To learn more about what it takes to get a Superfortress off the ground, the investigation turns to one of the last 2 airworthy B-29s.
125 is our abort speed. Below that we'll abort. Above that we'll fly. I am set. Here we go. Ready to roll.
The engines on this aircraft, of course, had to produce a lot of power. It's a big engine, big aircraft. So on takeoff, you know, you have turbocharged, you have super turbocharged, you know, they're at their maximum.
Every B-29 is loaded with a full tank of gas and the maximum possible bomb load. The result, a plane that is very heavy on takeoff.
All right, set max power. Max power, 100.
You're just barely able to fly on 4 engines. So if you lose an engine, there's no chance that you're going to fly on 3.
To end the war quickly, America is pushing these planes to their operational limits.
Well, a lot of these B-29s were rushed off the line. They were rushed through testing, and they were sent to the front lines. So they very quickly discovered that the engines were underpowering the airframe, and that's what led to a lot of these accidents. So these were not safe airplanes by any stretch of the imagination.
U.S. Air Force records reveal that during the war, 414 B-29s are lost. Nearly 2/3 of them due simply to mechanical problems, usually a catastrophic failure of an engine on takeoff.
You're out in the tropics where it's already hot and they're pushing this up there to max power. Your cylinder head temperatures are probably already out of limits. If it gets too hot, it's going to melt parts of the engine. It's going to cause engine failure, fire, and so on. You know, the airplane is just going to plop, crash, burn.
Now, by combining evidence from the seabed with historical records, it's possible to recreate the likely chain of events leading up to the crash. On takeoff from Tinian Island, the B-29 develops engine problems. Preparing for the worst, the crew raises the landing gear and releases their bombs. Once down, the plane sinks within minutes. There's no evidence that any of the crew survive. Despite constant mechanical problems, B-29s play a decisive role in the final stage of the war. And on August 6, 1945, a superfortress named the Enola Gay drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. A second bomb devastates Nagasaki. And 6 days later, Emperor Hirohito surrenders. The wrecks of 1945 survive as a testament to the sacrifices made by the military and the civilians of all nations. And a reminder of a year that reshapes the planet.
We still live with the legacy of nuclear weapons and what they might bring. We also live with the shift of borders, the shift of great nation states, the rise and fall of the Soviet Union. 1945 was a year that changed the face of the world.
A terrifying Nazi plan. An armada of superships sent out to conquer the world.
When these ships were being built, they seemed revolutionary. They were capable of almost anything.
They are fast and lethal.
When it punched hard.
But in a series of epic battles, Hitler's mighty killer warships are sent plunging to the bottom of the seas.
There's a big hole.
Imagine if we could empty the oceans, letting the water drain away to reveal the secrets of the seafloor. Now, we can, using accurate data and astonishing technology, to bring light once again to a lost world. What can shattered remains in a Norwegian fjord tell us about the Nazi Navy's fatal weakness?
The Norwegians decided they ought to open fire, which they did with very great effect.
Can a tangled wreck in South America reveal the truth behind a shocking sacrifice?
Hitler would have preferred a blazing battle out of a Wagner opera.
And can the remains of Hitler's largest ever battleship reveal evidence of a secret Allied wonder weapon? In the 1930s, Britannia still rules the waves with the world's largest and most powerful navy. But as soon as Hitler seizes power in 1933, he sets out to challenge it.
Hitler had introduced this plan to build this huge fleet. 10 battleships, 4 aircraft carriers, 160 destroyers, tens of cruisers.
When the war begins in 1939, much of this gigantic fleet is still on the drawing board. But Hitler does have something special. Powerful ocean raiders, capable of matching anything in the Royal Navy. Immediately deployed with deadly effect. In the South Atlantic, Nazi raider Graf Spee is hunting down merchant convoys carrying vital supplies to Europe. In just 3 months, she sinks 9 ships. Allied warships race to hunt her down. 3 British cruisers, Exeter, Ajax, and Achilles, spot their enemy off the coast of Uruguay. The British open fire. It's the first major sea battle of World War II. For the Graf Spee, it's also her last. But at the battle site itself, there's no sign of her. Jim Delgado, maritime archaeologist from Search, Inc., is heading into the treacherous River Plate, searching for the wreck. The waters here are turbulent and murky, so Jim is using high-tech multi-beam sonar to scan the estuary.
We're in shallow water.
Very shallow waters, between 8 to 10 meters.
With him is experienced Graf Spee researcher, Alfredo Echegari. If they find it, he'll recognize it.
The total length was about 188 meters.
Right.
The Graf Spee is a small battleship, for good reason. After World War I, German naval construction is tightly regulated. Her warships must be small in number and size. But Hitler works around the rules, creating a class of warship that's compact, but also very powerful, like the Graf Spee.
Graf Spee is designed to be a fast, hit-and-run raider. It's a Panzerschiff. It's a panther on the seas.
With her thin armor plating, the Graf Spee is light, fast, and maneuverable. And armed to the teeth. 6 11-inch guns and 8 torpedo tubes. There's a wreck.
Okay, wow. So it's still pretty intact. You've got your bow here. Decking is missing there, but there's forward gun turret. Right here, yes?
That's right.
The sonar images match Alfredo's plans. It's definitely the Graf Spee. So, why is it lying on the ocean floor here, far from the scene of the battle?
There's something more that goes on here.
Diving the wreck is difficult. The waters here are dangerous, with almost zero visibility. But by using the scan data, we can make the South Atlantic disappear. To let light fall once again on one of Hitler's favorite warships. Seeing the Graf Spee for the first time in 80 years. Much of her is intact. But the hull has suffered badly. And at the stern, the whole rear section is blown off, completely separated from the hull. Can the battle explain this damage?
3 small British vessels were outgunned and outmatched by Graf Spee.
The encounter is intense. The Graf Spee pounds the British cruisers, causing immense damage. But then the German captain makes a tactical error. He moves in too close. Allowing the British to surround their prey.
The 3 British cruisers peppered hampered Graf Spee with 8-inch and 6-inch shells. They scored some quite significant hits. They put a big hole through the bow.
But the shell damage alone could not have been enough to sink her, because the wreck is here, hundreds of miles from the battle site. Local archives show that on December 14th, the Graf Spee sails into the Uruguayan capital of Montevideo for essential repairs. Her captain, Hans Langsdorff, thinks his ship will be safe in this neutral country.
When he came in here, he was low on ammunition. He had a ship that was shot full of holes, he had some critical systems down. And he also had 1,000 crew, many of them young boys.
Meanwhile, the Royal Navy is gathering strength offshore.
And all the time, they keep watch in international waters, waiting to see what he'll do.
Langsdorff requests 15 days to make essential repairs. Uruguay might be neutral, but the Allies are important trade partners, so the government gives him just 3 days. The captain has two choices: remain in Uruguay and have his ship impounded, or leave port and face the British fleet.
The difficult choice he now has to make is, does he go back out and fight, or does he do something else?
With a battle-scarred ship and low on ammunition, Langsdorff leaves port with just a skeleton crew. It looks like a suicide mission, but the captain has another plan.
He decides to do something else, and that's to scuttle his ship.
At 7:55 p.m. on December 17th, massive charges on the ship explode. Bombs carefully placed by the Graf Spee's own crew. One is so powerful, the stern is blown clean off. The Graf Spee starts to sink into the mud of the River Plate. The Fuhrer is enraged.
What Hitler would have preferred was something out of a Wagner opera, with Langsdorff and his crew dying heroically in a blazing battle that saw Graf Spee explode and sink.
Langsdorff is labeled a coward. In his hotel room, he commits suicide. Hitler has lost one of his deadliest battleships. But how does a wreck in Scandinavia reveal his determination to build still more of them? Oslofjord, Norway. Nearly 500 feet of deep, dark water. The research vessel Simrad Echo is out hunting for a lost Nazi raider. A key part of Hitler's plans for an armada of super warships. Maritime archaeologist Fredrik Soreide is fascinated by them.
Oh, there it is. Right there. Oh, here it's coming. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we're doing a multi-beam scan of the seafloor, and we're just come over the wreck of the Blücher. So it's a big structure.
Today, the Blücher lies over 300 feet down. The team deploys a remotely operated vehicle with video cameras. Frederick knows the Blucher was lost in April 1940. So what was a huge Nazi warship doing in these neutral waters? To unravel the mystery means understanding Hitler's naval master plan in more detail. Six months into the conflict, the German Navy is still heavily outnumbered. The Nazis need to build fast, but Germany is running out of raw materials.
Hitler needs as much iron as he can get.
Starved of steel and the iron ore to make it, Hitler has only one option: to crush his northern neighbor, Norway. The port of Narvik is key. It's the route out for shipping iron ore to Germany from the mines in northern Scandinavia. Hitler also knows that Norway's long coastline gives easy access to the North Atlantic, where his raiders can strike at a moment's notice.
The double whammy of needing this iron ore, plus the ability of Norway to protect his ships, many of which will have been built out of that iron ore, makes Norway vital.
The Nazis need to move fast. So they assemble the most powerful naval force they have, led by a brand new fighting ship, the Blucher. Weighing in at over 14,000 tons, this warship breaks all the limits imposed on Germany after World War I. Fore and aft, pairs of innovative stacked guns for rapid firing, and a powerful anti-aircraft battery, all making the Blucher Hitler's #1 choice to lead this critical attack. Its secret mission: sail up Oslofjord, train its terrifying guns on the Royal Palace, and force Norway to surrender without firing a shot. Hitler is not expecting a lot of resistance from this neutral country. But the Blucher never makes it to Oslo. Back on the Simrad Echo, Frederick is trying to find out why.
So we think we're looking at one of the gun turrets that's fallen off, probably.
These cameras can only show a limited view of the wreck.
There's a big hole.
But using the high-resolution scan data, we can now do better. Draining back the icy waters to see the Blucher clearly for the first time since she set out to bully a nation into surrender. A massive hull, over 670 feet long, face down in the mud. Amidships, a gaping wound clearly visible in the hull. The Blucher lies tilted on her left side, part of the keel lying hidden from view, beneath the mud. But penetrating under the mud itself, it's possible to reveal something never seen before. Two gigantic holes below the waterline. Both of them fatal.
There is no doubt that the ship would sink as a result of getting such a hard impact.
And the mystery deepens. The Allies have no surface warships near Oslo. And the Norwegians have no active submarines in the area. What could have caused the holes? Investigation reveals something extraordinary below the surface. a mysterious cave. In 1940, the Germans know nothing about it.
The Norwegians were, and still are to some extent, very good at keeping secrets about their coast defenses.
Cut into the rock face, a hidden entrance. Historian Tony Pollard is investigating. It's a secret torpedo launch chamber.
These are incredible. Shaft just sinks down, and the torpedoes presumably load from the back.
A double cradle hangs over the shaft. Torpedoes are slid into the frame, winched down into the water, and fired.
There's no indication whatsoever to the enemy. There's no splash as this thing hits the water. It's literally coming out of the solid rock. It's amazing.
So what happens on the night the Blucher is sent to conquer Norway? Early morning, all seems quiet. Heavily armed, the Blucher brazenly leads a task force right into Oslofjord. They're not expecting any resistance. Certainly not from the 19th century Oscarsborg fortress.
The Germans, I think, thought that, well, we don't have to worry about this. They won't fire, and if they do, it won't be effective. But they were putting their head into a noose.
The commander of the garrison spots the Blucher and her task force approaching. As the German ships pass in front of the fortress, he opens fire. Multiple shell strikes on Blucher cause severe damage. Fires break out on board. Her rudder is jammed. But the Blucher limps on, unaware of the impending danger.
Having a secret torpedo nest in the island could come as a very nasty shock.
Each weapon carries 220 pounds of high explosives.
Because torpedoes hit below the waterline, where the water comes in quite rapidly, and it did.
It takes just 2 torpedoes to stop the mighty Blucher in her tracks. And she soon capsizes. Hitler calls on the Luftwaffe and his army to finish the job. And eventually, they do seize control of Norway. But his plan for a world-class navy has taken another blow.
The loss of the Blucher is particularly important. She is another one of these celebrity ships. Brand new, cutting edge. But she's gone. She's at the bottom of this fjord. And again, Hitler looks at the Navy and thinks, what the hell's happening here?
But the Nazis aren't done yet. One of Hitler's killer warships is set to achieve Germany's greatest ever naval victory in a battle of the giants. 1941. Nearly 18 months into the war, France has fallen, and Britain relies on supplies from across the Atlantic. But merchant convoys are vulnerable to attack from U-boats and Nazi ocean raiders. Most infamous of all, the Bismarck. In May, she's hunting Allied convoys. When HMS Hood, pride of the Royal Navy, tracks her down. The stakes are high in this heavyweight showdown, and there can be only one winner. So why are both of these powerful battleships now lying in deep waters 1,100 miles apart? As battle begins, the Bismarck has a slight upper hand. She's brand new and state-of-the-art. Her 15-inch guns can fire an impressive 24 miles. And her deck armor plating is thick at nearly 5 inches, offering excellent protection from incoming shells.
Creating Bismarck is all part of a larger plan to build powerful, iconic ships that are going to strike terror, enforcing Hitler's will on the rest of the globe.
On the British side, the famous HMS Hood. She's bigger than Bismarck at 860 feet long. But her main 15-inch guns are less powerful, firing just 17 miles. And her deck armor is thinner at 3 inches. She's also nearly 25 years old.
The Hood had a tremendous reputation, not just in the UK, but around the world. It was the most powerful, fastest, most feared, but also most loved warship for a 20-year period until the launch of the Bismarck.
Bismarck leaves her secret hideout in Norway. She plots a route through the Denmark Strait, west of Iceland, aiming for the North Atlantic and the Allied convoys. But she'll never make it that far. British intelligence discovers Bismarck is on the move. Hood is one of 3 ships sent to intercept. So what happens when these 2 giants come face to face? Wreck investigator David Mearns is tracking down the wreck of the Hood. He knows Hitler's top-tier battleship has the bigger punch, but just how much damage can the Bismarck inflict? The team begins to scan the seafloor at the last known location of the Hood in the Denmark Strait. But she's proving tough to find. Suddenly, the scan reveals a mysterious crater, almost 330 feet wide.
I think this is it.
Could it be a vital clue in the hunt for the Hood? The crater is nearly 2 miles down, too deep to dive. So David must use a remotely operated vehicle. It sends back tantalizing images. Shattered debris that suggests a catastrophic event. Next, the ROV finds a section of hull. It's so massive, it can only be the Hood. And it's overturned.
I've looked at 45 ships in deep water and never found one completely turned over.
Bismarck's deadly firepower has delivered a knockout blow.
In every single way, she is as badly destroyed as anybody could have imagined or described.
Using David's data, it's now possible to drain away billions of gallons of water from the Denmark Strait. And fully expose the wreck site for the first time. Spread across 1.5 miles of the seafloor, the shattered remains of over 40,000 tons of scarred and twisted metal. To the north, the conning tower. To the east, part of the bow and stern. Almost a half-mile away to the south, the largest intact section, the midships. the scattered remains suggest a massive explosion.
I wasn't expecting to see Hood as damaged as she was. That's what was completely unexpected. It was shocking, and it was very upsetting, actually.
Superimposing parts of the wreck onto the original plans of the Hood reveals a missing part of the ship between the stern and midships. The missing section of ship is where an ammunition store was located. It looks like this is the epicenter of the explosion.
What we know is that Bismarck's shell hit Hood and the aft part of the ship near the mainmast. There was this enormous explosion. They talked about it like a blow lamp, 600 feet high.
The shot that sank the Hood was in many ways a very lucky one for the Germans. If that shell had landed a little bit further aft, Hood may not have blown up.
It's now possible to piece together how the Bismarck sank the Hood in one of the shortest battles in naval history. Early morning. Hood spots the Bismarck. At a distance of over 14 miles, Hood fires her twin 15-inch guns. Bismarck takes a hit, damaging her fuel tanks. She returns fire. A shell hits Hood right above the ammunition stores. The great warship disappears beneath the waves in less than 3 minutes, with the loss of over 1,400 men.
HMS Hood, this great symbol of British imperial power, British sea power, blowing up the way she did with only 3 survivors, came as an enormous shock.
For the first time in centuries, Britannia cannot claim to rule the waves. And in the propaganda war, at least, German sea power is finally riding high. Bismarck appears invincible. But just 3 days after her great victory, she too lies at the bottom of the Atlantic. How did this ultimate killing machine meet her end?
It became very important for Churchill, the British government and the Royal Navy that the British should reassert their command of the sea by sinking Bismarck.
An armada of warships and squadrons of aircraft scour the ocean, hunting this killer down. A spotter plane picks up a trail of oil on the surface, leading straight to a wounded Bismarck. A staggering 2,800 shells rain down on Hitler's iconic battleship. Outnumbered, outgunned, and out of luck, Bismarck goes down and now lies 1,100 miles south of its opponent at the bottom of the sea.
She was powerful, she was beautiful, all eyes were on her. And at the end of the day, that was what killed her.
Hitler was shocked by the loss of this symbol of the prestige of the Third Reich. It was yet another nail in the coffin, if you like, of the German Navy.
The Tirpitz is Hitler's last great battleship. What can the sunken remains of Allied aircraft tell us about the extraordinary cost of destroying her? With the loss of the Bismarck in 1941, Hitler's faith in his navy is at an all-time low. He has one last battleship, the mighty Tirpitz. Terrified of losing her, the Fuhrer orders a series of major upgrades. The improved Tirpitz weighs in at nearly 53,000 tons, 2,000 more than her sister ship, the Bismarck. Her hull is strengthened, wrapped in 13-inch thick armor plating. Nearly 5 inches of steel protects the main deck. She bristles with 8 15-inch main guns and a staggering 72 anti-aircraft guns. She is an impenetrable floating fortress, perhaps the most perfect battleship ever put to sea. But despite her impressive armory, this Goliath spends most of her life hiding out in Norwegian fjords, becoming a major thorn in the side of Allied forces.
Tirpitz became what naval strategists call a fleet in being. It wasn't risked, but the risks it posed forced the British and the Americans at times to deploy considerable forces just in case it did do something.
But the Tirpitz does not survive the war. The story of her demise begins in this fjord near Trondheim. Maritime archaeologist Fredrik Søreide is on a mission to try to uncover the Tirpitz's shadowy past. He believes these deep waters may contain clues to help explain the lengths the Allies went to destroy the Tirpitz. The team is using specialist ROVs and deep water cameras.
Oh, look at that. Can we try to move a little bit closer? Or? Yeah.
The ghostly outline of an aircraft appears.
Cockpits. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. That's the nose and then the cockpit.
But what is this plane? And what's it doing here?
Wow.
Fredrik tries to ID the aircraft. He needs to take a closer look inside.
We're probably sitting in the pilot seat.
Look at that.
We have the stick.
Oh, yeah. That's the stick. That's the stick. Yeah. That's the stick.
From the layout of the cockpit and the position of the two propellers on each side of the aircraft, Fredrik believes this is a British Halifax bomber. More ROV dives discover the Halifax is not alone. The bed of the fjord is littered with the remains of downed aircraft.
We believe that there are 40, 50 plane wrecks resting on the bottom of this fjord. This area really saw a lot of action. So this is really a veritable plane graveyard.
There must have been something really special here for the Allies to suffer such huge losses. And Fredrik discovers there is. The Tirpitz was hiding here for 1 year, heavily defended with anti-aircraft guns. But there's another reason why so many bombing raids fail. Scientist Claudia Hartill is gathering evidence from the most unlikely of places: the pine-clad slopes high above the fjord. Claudia takes core samples from deep inside the trees, revealing the growth rings.
They record everything. They are time machines. They can tell you the past.
Each ring records 1 year of the tree's growth. Claudia carefully counts back until she reaches the early 1940s and notices something unusual.
So you can see here wider rings when you have a period of very narrow rings. You have a period of very low growth.
It's the same for all the trees in the area. During the war, something is stunting the tree's growth.
This is tree damage caused by the artificial smoke to hide the tirpitz.
The Germans had dozens of smoke generators around the fjord, pumping out dense acid clouds, poisoning the trees, but hiding their ship from Allied bombers overhead.
The Germans proved very adept at protecting Tirpitz with smoke screens.
She's almost got a cloaking device, like something out of Star Trek, and she foils raid after raid.
But Hitler knows his last killer battleship is on borrowed time. Fearing the Allies might get lucky, in October 1944, he orders the Tirpitz to sail to a new location, Hakoya Island. It's to be her last voyage.
So we're just outside of Tromsø, and this is the final resting place of the Tirpitz, just below this area. But remember, this ship was enormous.
Frederick puts down a remotely operated underwater camera.
The whole seafloor is basically littered with stuff.
Yeah, it's a big area.
After 75 years, shells capable of traveling 20 miles remain intact.
It looks like it, doesn't it?
I think, yeah, there's a book.
There's a book.
Personal items. A book with the pages still clearly readable. But very little of this enormous battleship remains. But now, using historical records, coastal scans, and state-of-the-art computer visualization, we can roll back the waters of Hakoya Island as they were in 1944. The Tirpitz is lying upside down in shallow waters. Near the port bow, a gigantic hole. Towards the stern, evidence of 2 more impacts, all punched through the thick 5-inch armor plating. And directly alongside the ship, more evidence. An enormous crater, 100 feet wide, gouged into the seabed. What weapon could have caused such catastrophic damage? October 1944, Hakoya Island, northern Norway. Hitler's last great battleship, the Tirpitz, is hiding out just off the shoreline. The Germans know the Tirpitz is on the Allies' most wanted list. Underwater nets protect her from torpedo attacks. Sand and rubble are piled up around the hull to prevent the Tirpitz from capsizing if hit. She survived over 2 years of aerial attacks. So what happens here, less than 1 month after arriving, that sends her to the bottom of the fjord? At the side of the wreck, a huge bomb crater. On the deck, holes punched straight through the extra thick steel, too big to be shell or torpedo damage. What could cause such devastating destruction? The evidence of its power still scars the landscape today at Hakoya Island. Churchill is determined the Tirpitz must be destroyed. But to cut through her 5-inch thick steel deck, the Allies need a more powerful bomb than ever before. There's only one man to turn to, the brains behind the legendary bouncing bomb of the Dam Busters raid, Barnes Wallis. And the weapon he develops is so huge, the planes carrying it have to be specially adapted and stripped down. It's called the Tall Boy. Towering at a mighty 21 feet, its unique aerodynamic shape allows it to free fall quickly and accurately through the air, breaking the sound barrier. At 6 tons, it's designed to penetrate the ground to depths of 80 feet and only then explode.
And these are massive, almost earthquaking, explosive devices.
The mission to destroy the Tirpitz is highly dangerous. She's well protected with anti-aircraft guns, so the bombers need to get in and out fast. There's only one squadron for the job, 617, the Dam Busters themselves.
617 Squadron had become the leading exponent of precision bombing. They were able to drop these Barnes-Wallis designed weapons with great accuracy, and they were therefore a tremendous danger for an anchored warship, however well protected.
At 18,000 feet, dodging anti-aircraft fire, the bomb aimers of the 617 Squadron finally get the Tirpitz in their sights. The Tall Boys accelerate through 500, 600, 700 miles per hour. Several miss their targets, cratering the shoreline. But others are set firmly on a deadly course. Tall Boys punch straight through the Tirpitz's steel decking.
So these bombs turn out to be very powerful tools against the Tirpitz. And for the first time, they really managed to penetrate the steel.
Other Tall Boys destroy the huge sandbank built to protect the Tirpitz from capsizing. Within minutes, the vessel lists and rolls over. The Tirpitz, like her sister ship, the Bismarck, is gone.
By the time Tirpitz was sunk, Hitler had completely lost faith in the German Navy. He'd actually ordered the German Navy to be scrapped. There were other things to worry about.
The death of the Tirpitz marks a revolution in naval warfare. The future belongs to submarines, striking from beneath the waves, and aircraft carriers that can launch attacks anywhere in the world. Hitler's dream is dead, and with it, the age of the battleship. Under the seas off northern Europe, a lost graveyard of mega warships.
They were the H-bombs of the era.
In 1916, these are among the most powerful weapons ever built. At the height of the Great War, they stage an epic showdown.
This is a fight to the death.
But with the evidence lost deep beneath the waves, the battle remains shrouded in mystery. Until now. Imagine if we could empty the oceans, letting the water drain away to reveal the secrets of the seafloor. Now, we can. Using the latest underwater scanning technology, piercing the deep oceans and turning accurate data into 3D images. The Battle of Jutland is the greatest naval action of World War I. But which side actually wins? After the war ends, how does a fleet of gigantic battleships simply vanish? And in World War II, what sinks one of the last great Jutland warships while it's anchored in a safe harbor? (1916). Germany is at war with Britain and her allies. In the North Sea, two mighty fleets are set to clash in the biggest sea battle of World War I. It will ultimately decide who wins the Great War. Yet, astonishingly, both sides claim victory.
For such a climactic battle, Jutland is one that is shrouded in mystery as well as controversy.
As the waters begin to drain away, do they reveal who really wins the Battle of Jutland? Danish research vessel Vina is hunting for the ships destroyed in this titanic naval clash.
So this might be the beginning of a wreck field.
The crew is using high-tech multi-beam sonar scans to do what no one else has ever attempted: uncover the entire Jutland battlefield. Solving the mystery of the battle is a personal quest for Nick Jellicoe. He's the grandson of Admiral Sir John Jellicoe, the commander of the British fleet. Admiral Jellicoe's mission is to destroy the German Imperial Navy and help win World War I.
The burden of command that sat on my grandfather's shoulders that day was huge. All their lives depended on what he was going to do.
Jellicoe commands the most powerful fleet in history, and it's facing its biggest test.
Jutland is the ultimate clash of battleships and battle cruisers. Perhaps the sort of ultimate warships ever built in terms of their military sex appeal.
Before the First World War, Britain and Germany are locked in a dangerous arms race, spending billions on ever larger and more powerful battleships. Each hopes to intimidate the other, but it only inflames the tensions between them.
Ultimately, what this naval arms race leads to is war.
There is only one survivor from this age of naval giants: the USS Texas. The length of this megaship is equivalent to the height of a 50-story skyscraper.
These ships were the ultimate weapons. When you had one of these, there was nothing that was more powerful.
Weighing in at 27,000 tons, the USS Texas is a dreadnought-type battleship, like many of the ships that fight at Jutland.
The thing that makes this so enormously impressive is the technology that went into making it. The complicated engines, the hugely capable guns, all of this in an enormous hull, much larger than any ship that had been built before.
These massive 14-inch guns are among the biggest on the high seas.
Texas had 10 of them. If you're within range, it'll punch through 12 inches of armor.
When war breaks out in 1914, at first, neither Britain nor Germany dare risk losing their massively expensive fleets in a head-to-head confrontation. They finally clash in a titanic battle at Jutland in 1916. Using the data collected by the Vina, it's now possible to do something that no historian or archaeologist has been able to attempt before. Drain away the waters of the North Sea to reveal the remains of the greatest sea battle of World War I. As the seawater flows away, a haunted world slowly emerges. The smashed wrecks of the ultimate battleships. Broken, twisted debris from not one, but dozens of warships. Across a huge area, 5,000 square miles. May 31st, 1916. The German fleet sets out on a secret mission. Their plan is to locate, attack, and destroy a small part of the British Grand Fleet.
The British Grand Fleet is vastly superior to the German High Sea Fleet, both numerically and also in terms of gunpowder.
The Germans, under Admiral Scheer, have less than 100 warships, compared to the Royal Navy's 150.
Scheer's original plan was to come out with his fleet, run parallel to the Danish coast, Jutland, and hopefully come across some British ships in the numbers that he can deal with.
By heading out, the Germans are setting a trap for the British. They want to lure a small force of their enemy into the open sea. Only then will they attack.
All they can do is hope to wear down the British Grand Fleet in a series of engagements to a point where perhaps the two sides might be more even in numbers.
The Germans have been preparing their strategy in secret.
For the Germans, this battle is der Tag. It's the day.
But the British have a trap of their own. They've cracked the secret radio codes, ordering the Germans into action. The Royal Navy mobilized 151 ships in 2 battle groups.
For the British, this is an opportunity to crush the Kaiser's fleet and win the war at sea.
The Germans don't know it yet, but their 99 ships are heading exactly where the British want them. It should be an easy victory for the Royal Navy. Around 4:30 p.m. on May 31st, the two fleets sight each other, and the Germans open fire. Over the next 12 hours, Jutland becomes the biggest sea battle of World War I. But what exactly happens is still shrouded in mystery. Even on the day itself, neither side knows the precise movements of the other. In the days before modern satellite navigation, no one knows their exact positions. Both sides are running blind. To send and receive orders, they use flags, but that doesn't work when the visibility is poor.
There are thick fog banks, there's funnel smoke all over the battlefield, there's even chemical smoke screens being laid down.
Vina is using the sonar scans to pinpoint the exact position of one of the early casualties of the battle, the ironically named HMS Invincible.
Goodness me, what are these? Could this be a gun?
Yeah, you see the gun.
One of the barrels?
It's upside down.
First, they locate 2 gun turrets. But where is the ship they come from?
Look at this, look at this. I think we found something here.
Yeah.
It's now possible to drain the waters of the North Sea. Not only revealing the wreck of Invincible, but also evidence of the explosive violence of its final moments. Over 17,000 tons of high-grade steel. Armor plating 6 inches thick has simply been shattered by a huge explosion. The hull of Invincible is literally blasted in two. Such is the explosive force that wrecks the ship that its gun turrets lie almost 400 feet away. The power of the blast must have blown them clean out of the ship.
You know how much these things weigh. These are about sort of 200 tons. Can you imagine the violence and the force of this explosion?
Amazing, isn't it?
It's extraordinary.
The hull is broken at the spot where Invincible's two central gun turrets are connected to the ammunition stores below. What does this reveal about how the ship explodes? Like the USS Texas, Invincible has fireproof blast doors that stop fires spreading, preventing the entire vessel from exploding. So what goes wrong? Draining the water of the North Sea is uncovering secrets about the Battle of Jutland and helping solve a controversial question. Is it the Germans or the British who win the battle? The drained wreck of HMS Invincible reveals extraordinary damage. Can the shattered remains offer clues about how the explosion snaps the ship clean in half?
This is a tremendous shock, and it produces very heavy casualties. A ship of this size going up is going to kill 1,000 people.
There is one substance explosive enough to blow up a warship, a type of gunpowder known as cordite. And battleships like Invincible and the USS Texas are packed with tons of it. It's what allows them to fire their deadly payload.
The whole purpose of this enormous ship is to take this projectile, which weighs half as much as a Toyota, and push it out 10 or 15 miles to hit an enemy. Some husky sailors would lift up 4 of these big propellant bags. Inside was cordite. Central Station fires the gun, ignites the cordite, pushing this shell out at about 4 times the speed that an airliner flies. About 25 seconds later, and 10 miles away, this thing comes down and we hope hits the enemy.
But the danger for all battleships is that if their own cordite store is ignited by an enemy shell, the entire vessel explodes. So extraordinary safety features to keep fires from spreading are built into the design of battleships like the USS Texas. Cordite is stored in magazines deep inside the ship. The metal blast doors seal the magazines, preventing fire from spreading down from the guns above. And the highly flammable bags of cordite are passed up to the guns through secure hatches. So with all these elaborate safety precautions in place, what goes wrong on the Invincible? Vina deploys a submersible camera to search for evidence around the turrets.
Oh gosh, look at that. We're right underneath. There's something here. It does look more like a shell, doesn't it? So just below the shell, one can see the top of a cordite container and strands of cordite, because it came in these sort of long stick-like strands, all bundled together. Quick burning, very unstable.
The cordite and shells piled together in the wrecked turret expose a fatal vulnerability. The Royal Navy is playing with fire, literally.
They could be ignited if something went wrong inside the turret itself.
The drained wreck shows the force of the blast goes through the ship from top to bottom. There's only one possible explanation. The blast doors are left open. This solves the mystery. A German shell hits the gun turret amidships and ignites the cordite. Fire spreads in seconds through the open doors to the main ammunition store below. The result: Invincible is torn in half and the two gun turrets blown sky high.
The impact of 100 tons of cordite going off is enormous. It'll tear a ship in half. It tore Invincible in two.
But why would Invincible's crew risk leaving the fireproof blast doors wide open?
In naval warfare, there are different approaches to fighting. For the British, it's rapidity of fire. It's getting as many shells off as fast as you can.
To increase the rate of fire, magazine doors are left open. The propellants are piled up. You hit anywhere in that system, and you have a trail of destruction going down into the magazines. Some magazine doors were actually taken off. This is suicidal.
This tactical error causes the Royal Navy to lose 4 of its best ships in less than 3 hours, and the battle is yet to reach its climax. Emptying the North Sea reveals the extent of the battlefield. This extraordinary drained landscape helps decipher the course of the action.
When you look at the entire battlefield, if you were to take all the water away, what you see is each warrior where they fell, the position in which they lie, the type of damage that they took. In a larger forensic sense, helps you recreate the Battle of Jutland.
About 4 hours into the battle, the Germans still believe they're facing a small part of the British fleet, until the sea fog lifts.
Suddenly, Admiral Scheer, the German commander, sees the whole northern horizon light up with the gunfire of a long line of British battleships. This is his worst nightmare.
Scheer is staring down the awesome firepower of the main British battle fleet. With 50 more ships than his enemy, Admiral Jellicoe has an extraordinary opportunity.
The British didn't just want victory, they wanted total annihilation of the German fleet.
The classic naval tactic is to cross the enemy's T. Have your fleet sail across the front of the enemy fleet so that you concentrate your firepower and the enemy doesn't have as many guns brought to bear.
It's a moment of potential annihilation. This is the critical point of the battle in many ways.
By crossing the T, the British bring the full force of their weapons to bear. They open fire. The German reaction is astonishing. They launch a daring escape bid under heavy fire, risking collisions between their ships.
As the British cross the T, the Germans execute an incredible feat of seamanship. They turn 180. The British aren't even expecting this. And so the Germans get out of the trap.
One moment, Jellicoe has all the German fleet in his sights. 4 minutes later, nothing.
The Royal Navy misses a golden opportunity to destroy the German fleet and change the course of the war. Draining the whole Jutland battlefield uncovers more wrecks, revealing how the Germans try to get away and the British try to catch them. Vina heads south, hunting for the remains of a warship that reveals the lengths the Germans are willing to go to avoid capture. Lutzow.
Lutzow was the newest of the German battlecruisers, only just been commissioned. And she was a very fine ship. She had 8 12-inch guns, very heavily protected.
The waters of the North Sea drain away. and Lutzow appears for the first time in over 100 years. This reveals astonishing new evidence of the ship's extraordinary fate. Lutzow lies face down. There's damage to the hull, but unlike Invincible, the ship hasn't been blown in half. So what sinks Lutzow? Draining away the cold, dark waters of the North Sea reveals one of the most powerful German warships at Jutland. Lutzow.
Lutzow is heavily mauled in the battle, so much so that it's almost like target practice for the Royal Navy.
Lutzow is heavily damaged, but the wreck reveals a surprise. The hull is not blown into separate pieces.
It actually looks like quite a complete hull, so not battle damage.
Not battle damage.
Yeah.
Lutzow's intact hull is evidence it doesn't blow up, and Vena's cameras now suggest a possible reason why. The ship's highly explosive cordite is stored in these protective metal canisters.
The German systems used brass cartridge cases to carry the propellant from place to place, so it was enclosed and less likely to ignite.
The drained seabed also shows the wreck lies nowhere near where the British fleet is operating, suggesting it is not sunk by the Royal Navy. The wreck reveals extensive damage below the waterline. Evidence that Lutzow is struck by weapons feared by all the ultimate battleships. Torpedoes. Unleashed not by the Royal Navy, but by the Germans.
Lutzow gets away from the British, and limping home, the crew realizes that the ship's not going to make it. Rather than leave it afloat for the British to capture and make a trophy of, they decide to sink it.
Packed with advanced military technology, it's vital that Lutzow doesn't fall into enemy hands. But that's not all.
There's honor at stake here. And so they scuttle it, and they see nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's the type of action that will get you a medal.
But the pride that drives the Germans to sink one of their best ships comes at a terrible price.
There were men still trapped in the dynamo room. They had stayed on board to keep the light running so that their comrades could get off. They were the ones who were told they're not going to get off. The ship is going to be torpedoed by their own torpedo boats. They knew they were going to die.
Eight hours into the battle, night has fallen. The battered German fleet is running south to its base at Wilhelmshaven. Draining the wrecks lying closer to Germany reveals what happens when the British catch up to the Germans. Will they prevent their escape, destroy their fleet, and win the battle? Vena is following the course the British take as they pursue the Germans south in the darkness. Scans pick up another wreck. It's a British armored cruiser, a type of warship completely outgunned by German battleships.
We can see the propeller shaft here and some extensive damage in the stern section.
Vena has found the wreck of HMS Black Prince. Draining away the seawater reveals that the hull is broken clean in two. A gun turret lies exactly in the position where the hull splits. It's taken a direct hit, and the magazines have blown up. From the drained wreck, we can start to piece together what happens. While looking to rejoin the main British fleet, Black Prince runs into a formation of 12 German battleships, and in the darkness, mistakes them for the Royal Navy. The wreck lies pointing to the northeast, confirming Black Prince is trying desperately to steer away from the Germans.
We know from the archaeology now that the ship appears to have turned. So they knew what danger they were in. They didn't just sail into it, but they turned too little too late.
All 857 men on board are lost. Black Prince is not the only ship the British lose as they pursue the enemy. At least 4 more warships are sunk. The German rear guard action uses torpedo attacks to keep Jellicoe's force at bay. Knowing his fleet is not well equipped for night fighting, he disengages. The following day, the Germans make it safely back to base. The Royal Navy fails to stop their escape. After just 12 hours, the Battle of Jutland is over. 10,000 sailors are dead. As dawn breaks over the North Sea, bodies from each side start to wash up along the Danish coast. Even though they have retreated, the Germans claim victory because they have fewer losses. The British have lost 14 ships. Admiral Scheer's German fleet, just 11.
He has inflicted incredible losses on the Royal Navy. He has sunk more British tonnage and killed more British sailors than he has lost. So to his mind, and for the Kaiser and for Germany, this is a victory.
But despite losing more ships and men, Admiral Jellicoe's fleet ultimately wins the battle because they now have complete command of the North Sea. For the rest of the war, German battleships never dare challenge the full might of the Royal Navy again.
The crucial strategic fact is that the British Grand Fleet is acting as the stopper in the bottle to stop German surface ships getting out.
Taking control of the sea after this battle is decisive in winning World War I. For 2 years after Jutland, Britain blockades German ports, slowly starving the country into submission. In 1918, Britain and her allies are victorious. Germany is forced to give up its navy without another shot being fired. But if the conflict is over, why does the entire German fleet now lie on the bottom of the sea? When World War I ends on November 11th, 1918, the German High Seas Fleet is anchored in its main base. But a little over 6 months later, it's on the seabed, 500 miles away, here, off the northern tip of Scotland. The Orkney Islands cluster around a gigantic natural harbor called Scapa Flow. Using the latest data from detailed underwater scanning, it's possible to drain away the waters here. The sea pushes back to expose narrow passages between the islands. This ancient submerged landscape makes Scapa Flow one of the largest natural deepwater harbors in the world. The perfect place to imprison a battle fleet. Skipper John Thornton knows these waters better than most.
Scapa is a very special and unique place in that the waters are sheltered. It's the reason why it was used as a British naval harbour. Also, its position geographically is very strategic.
November 1918. The defeated German fleet is ordered to set sail into captivity.
The Germans, with flags flying, steam out and come into Scapa Flow. And there they're to be interned.
They're anchored at Scapa, while politicians from the victorious Allies decide how they'll divide up these spoils of war worth billions.
It must have given the Germans terrible feelings of disgrace and humiliation, and a determination not to allow these ships to fall into the hands of the Allies.
The political wrangling over which of the Allies will get which of the German ships continues. June 1919, nearly 7 months after their capture, the 74 German ships remain at anchor under Royal Navy Guard. Their skeleton crews, prisoners on their own vessels.
They had to be fed and supplied from Germany. The British refused to supply them locally. They're on the ships with no entertainment, no heating, so these poor people would have had a grim time.
Using the latest sonar data, draining Scapa Flow reveals the fate of the German fleet. As the water recedes, it uncovers the wreck of one of the most advanced ships in the entire German Navy. Packing no fewer than 10 12-inch guns, Markgraf is brand new when the war starts in 1914. The drained wreck now reveals huge chunks cut out of the hull more recently by salvagers, searching for valuable scrap metals. The ship capsizes as it goes down. There are no signs of battle damage along the giant hull. So what sinks the Markgraf? These portholes are clearly visible close to what was the waterline, and they appear to be open. From the dive boat Karen, a team sets out to investigate the wreck. They want to find out if the portholes were opened before or after the ship sank.
It's a huge ship. I mean, your only impression is just scale. Minute after minute, just slowly moving along it, it just keeps going and keeps going. She's a massive ship.
Dan's picture clearly shows an open porthole.
Here's one with the actual glass porthole still in place.
But it's open.
It's wide open.
Right.
There's no way a diver could have got on the inside
To have opened.
to have undogged that porthole.
Right.
So it had to have been sunk with the porthole wide open.
It's a vital clue, revealing an amazing event.
One of the most incredible acts in the history of any navy.
There are more German battleships lying on the bottom of Scapa Flow. These wrecks are undamaged. No sign of explosions. No holes made by torpedoes. It can only mean one thing.
What the Germans do under the noses of their captors is to simultaneously scuttle their fleet. That is, send it to the bottom.
Shocked witnesses take pictures of the ships actually sinking. It's June 21st, 1919. The decision on how the German fleet is to be divided up is due to be announced. Under secret orders from Germany, Fleet Commander von Reuter has been quietly preparing this moment for months.
The Germans saw scuttling the fleet as actually a way of getting back at their captors. It was actually an aggressive move. The Germans have got their revenge at last, 3 years after the Battle of Jutland.
Sinking their entire fleet prevents the Allies from getting their hands on the German ships. But sinking 74 warships at the same time requires more than just leaving portholes open. How did they do it? David Manley is a naval architect with an unusual skill. His job is testing ships by trying to sink them. HMS Belfast is a typical warship. It has weak spots if you know what to look for and have the right tools.
We're well below the waterline here, and this pipe is one of the ways in which you would very easily sink a ship of this size. And all you need is just a sledgehammer like this, hit the pipe hard, give it a good whack, split it apart. The force of the water coming out of here, well, I mean, if you were standing near it, it would take your head off. It'd be enough to fill this compartment completely in just a few minutes. And then everybody is just heading for the upper deck.
With their ships flooding, the German crews have to evacuate from deep within the hull.
The amount of coordination is just fantastic. To do that under the eyes of the British who are guarding the fleet is a feat of amazing skill, amazing ingenuity. Right, so it's taken me a few minutes to get up here from the engine room, but at least I'm on the upper deck, I'm safe, I can escape.
But in Scapa Flow, when the Germans reach the decks of their sinking ships, they are far from safe. This cemetery bears witness to the tragic consequences when British guards realize what is happening.
Here is the last resting place of the 9 or so German sailors who were killed during the scuttle. Walter Schumann was the commander of the SMS Markgraf. He was shot after he had surrendered. They were effectively the last casualties of the First World War.
German sailors make the supreme sacrifice, shot while surrendering after preventing the capture of their ships. In 1919, 74 German warships are scuttled in Scapa Flow. But draining the water reveals only 7 actual shipwrecks and ghostly imprints left behind by the others. What happened to the missing warships? As a boy, Ian Murray Taylor lived on the shores of Scapa. He's the last man alive who went inside one of the scuttled German warships.
I went right down through the ship. It was very dirty and dusty, and the air was a bit whiffy, and you could look down onto the seabed below.
In 1924, Ian's grandfather, Thomas Mackenzie, starts recovering the sunken wrecks. His family films the extraordinary work that brings them back to the surface, so the valuable steel can be sold for scrap. Divers seal holes in the hull. Compressed air is pumped in until the ship is buoyant, like filling a balloon with air. Then the massive battleships explode back to the surface. In this way, during the 1920s and 30s, all but 7 of the German wrecks are raised. Their hulls are towed away and broken into pieces. There are willing buyers for the salvaged metal. Among them, Adolf Hitler. He's building a powerful new navy. Scrap metal from the German fleet returns home to be melted down and reused for a new and deadly purpose.
What also happened in the aftermath of Scapa Flow is, for the Germans in particular, a sense of a war that really hadn't ended. What followed was a grim determination to come back and fight that war again.
1939. The Nazis used the steel from the sunken German megaships to prepare a new generation of weapons.
There is something of full circle here. The Germans are getting their own back.
They've learned the bitter lessons of Jutland. This time, they'll use submarines, not battleships, to wage war.
The era of the big battleships, which dominated the seas, was over.
In Scapa Flow, the sinking of one particular ship marks the dramatic end of this era. Investigators scanning this unique wreck for the British Ministry of Defense reveal a capsized hull resting on its twisted superstructure. But only by draining the water away is it possible to see close up the evidence of what sinks this veteran of Jutland. HMS Royal Oak. One side appears undamaged, but the other displays gaping wounds. What sends Royal Oak to the bottom in this safe haven?
The level of impact and the destruction is just mind-bending to see.
October 1939, 1 month into World War II. The Nazis want revenge on the British and are hunting for targets.
It was of great symbolic value to hit the Royal Navy in its heart. And Scapa Flow was, of course, the heart of the Royal Navy.
Royal Oak lies safely at anchor. The crew, including over 150 young sailors under 18, suspect nothing. The guns are trained on the skies in case of Nazi air raids. But the real threat lies below. At the time of Jutland, old ships are deliberately sunk to block Scapa's narrow entrances and defend against submarine attacks. But now they're falling apart, and it's possible to sneak past them.
There were now passages for submarines to get through, where a daring submarine commander could actually get into the flow.
October 14th, 12:58 a.m. U-boat ace Gunther Prien stealthily navigates U-47 through the poorly defended channels of Scapa. The men and boys aboard Royal Oak have no idea of the danger they're in. Examining the drained wreck reveals Prien's first torpedo smashes clean through the bow.
They all thought that it was an explosion in the paint store or of the aviation fuel store. They didn't realize they were being attacked.
The wreck now reveals 3 more torpedo strikes along the hull. These are the death blows, smashing huge holes in Royal Oak. Fatally wounded below the waterline, Royal Oak begins to capsize. For most, there's no escape. The ship sinks in minutes. 833 sailors are lost. More than 130 of them are just boys.
It was received with enormous enthusiasm in Germany. Hitler sent his airplane to Kiel to pick up the crew and fly to Berlin, where people hailed them and everybody was happy.
So it's one of the greatest ironies, perhaps, in naval warfare, that out of the scuttling at Scapa Flow comes the steel that helps rearm Germany, and one of those ships, one of these U-boats, sneaks into Scapa Flow and sinks a veteran of Jutland. If that's not ironic, I don't know what is.
The wrecks of Jutland and Scapa Flow bear silent witness to a lost age of naval warfare. But draining the ultimate battleships reveals the world-changing impact of the day they fought to the death and the courage of the men and boys who served aboard them. Hitler's darkest secrets and most terrifying weapons lost below the waves until now. Imagine if we could empty the oceans, letting the water drain away to reveal the secrets of the seafloor. Now we can. Using the latest underwater scanning technology, piercing the deep oceans, and turning accurate data into 3D images. This time, was Australia's most prized warship destroyed by a Nazi secret weapon? What made this killer U-boat invisible? And how close did Hitler come to building an atomic bomb? Hitler's ambition was global. As the waters of Northern Europe drain away, they reveal evidence of the Nazis' most terrifying weapon of all. Norway, Lake Tinn. How did a secret operation here destroy a Nazi nuclear dream?
At the bottom, there's this Nazi secret. No one can be sure about what's down there.
During World War II, Nazi scientists begin the race to harness atomic power.
Hitler's dream was to develop this bomb that could really devastate and destroy London. Turning the war in the blink of a second. That was his dream.
But the Nazis need a crucial ingredient to make an atomic bomb. It's called heavy water.
Heavy water was a vital component of the attempt of the Germans to get their nuclear reactor to work. It's chemically hydrogen, but it's heavier. It's twice the weight.
The world's largest producer of heavy water is near Lake Tinn in Norway. Vemork Power Plant, once the world's largest hydroelectric power station. It's this energy that powers the creation of the precious heavy water. April 9th, 1940. Germany invades Norway.
The Nazis were eager to get control of the heavy water at the Vemork plant, due to the reason that they wanted to use it as a cooling aid in their nuclear reactor. In 1942, at the peak of the production here at Vemork, they produced as much as 1,000 kilos of heavy water.
Over a ton is a big step towards building Hitler's first nuclear reactor.
It looked as if Germany might well get a nuclear bomb quickly, and the Allies were obviously very concerned about that. Churchill wanted the heavy water plant to be destroyed.
Vamork power plant becomes a priority target for Allied air raids and sabotage. Damage like this eventually forces the Nazis to safeguard their stockpile of the precious commodity. February 20th, 1944. The Nazis plan to move almost a year's output of heavy water by train from Vamork. The carriages will cross Lake Thyn by ferry. From here, the cargo will travel to Germany, to the site of a nuclear reactor. Soldiers load around 40 barrels onto railway carriages. The hydro ferry departs, but it never reaches its destination. At 10:45 in the morning, it sinks. The cargo tumbles into the water. 27 people are rescued. 26 go down with the ferry, mostly innocent civilians. For decades, the hydro ferry and her secret wartime cargo lie hidden in the dark waters. Until now. Fredrik Soreda is a maritime archaeologist. He has studied this area for over 20 years.
I'm standing on the shores of Lake Thyn. It's a very dramatic lake in Norway. It's got high mountains up to 1,000 meters around it, and the lake is very deep, so it actually goes down to 460 meters. For decades, this lake had a big secret. And to be able to uncover that secret, the whole lake had to be explored.
1,500 feet is too deep for divers. So Fredrik works with an expert in remotely operated vehicles, Thor Olav Sperre.
So today we have the remotely operated vehicle. It is used to go down to the shipwreck so that we can film it and also make a lot of other interesting documentation.
They're equipping the ROV with the latest multi-beam sonar technology, allowing them to probe the darkest depths.
Take it up and then we can load a new profile and then start doing the other tests. Yeah.
Multi-beam sonar fires sound waves to the lake floor. The return signal displays the shape and depth of the features beneath.
It becomes then a very detailed image, and that's what we're looking at. That's what we want.
And Thor Olav knows where to look. He's been fascinated by the story of the lost ferry for years, and he was one of the first to find the wreck. Now, he's back with powerful new scanning equipment and cameras that will finally give him the most detailed record of what's down there. Eventually, a ghostly shape looms into view. The icy depths of the freshwater lake have preserved the decades-old secret.
Oh, there we go.
Coming in there.
Oh, there it is.
I see the rail.
Where are we now?
On starboard.
Very nice. The superstructure is still standing there, and we can see a lot of things on board still.
We're only 3.5 meters above it.
Oh, look, that's is that a railway carriage? Or?
Yes, it is. Upside down.
It's upside down. So it's been thrown over. Yeah, that's the wheels.
The cargo on these carriages was once destined for Nazi Germany. Instead, it lies deep in the darkness of a Norwegian lake. But why is the ferry here? For the very first time, the waters of Lake Tinn drain away to reveal the true picture. Using multi-beam sonar data combined with cutting-edge computer graphics, the lake's astonishing underwater landscape comes clearly into view. The first clue lies in the shape of the valley itself. There are steep banks which descend 1,500 feet down to the bottom of one of the deepest lakes in Europe. As the waters of the lake drain fully away, the drowned ferry is brought back into the light of day for the first time in over 70 years. First, the stern of the 170-foot-long vessel, tilting downwards. Then, the wreckage of the railway carriages. And the captain's wheelhouse. The spread of the wreckage is firm evidence of a catastrophic, sudden sinking.
Here we can clearly see the wreck, and we can see the wheelhouse up here.
Yeah.
And we can see there's something behind here. Maybe
the bow is probably down in the mud.
So what wrecked the ferry? The answer is one of the most daring sabotage operations of World War II. Norwegian resistance fighters learn about the Nazi heavy water shipment. They are ordered by London to stop it at all costs. The night before the ferry departs, under cover of darkness, the saboteurs board the vessel and place a time bomb set to detonate at a precise moment, then leave the ship to its fate.
The saboteurs knew the stakes couldn't be higher. They had to stop the transportation to Germany.
Draining Lake Tinn reveals that the ferry is precisely targeted to sink in the deepest part of the lake. No Nazi diver can ever retrieve the barrels of heavy water from these depths. But is the ferry carrying enough heavy water to give Hitler an atomic bomb? Draining Lake Tinn in Norway reveals an infamous Nazi nuclear secret strewn across the lake bed. Was there enough heavy water on board to make the Nazis' nuclear bomb program go critical?
After the ferry went down, there was a lot of speculation that the heavy water on board the Hydro had been replaced by normal water because it was so lightly guarded. So we wanted to go down and take up a barrel to prove that this was, in fact, the heavy water that was being shipped to Germany.
The team has already examined 3 barrels from the depths. Testing samples taken from inside the barrels proves that they do contain heavy water. But was the ferry's cargo large enough to help Hitler build an atomic bomb? The only way to find out is to probe the darkness of Lake Tinn and see how many barrels are left. Draining the waters of this Norwegian lake unlocks the answers. Amazingly, still intact after more than 70 years. First, one barrel on the deck, then two more spilled over the side. Then two others, 60 feet from the wreck site. That's 5 barrels visible around the wreck.
Well, you can still see numbers on the barrels, yeah. We believe that maybe 10 barrels floated because they were not full. And we have picked up 3 barrels.
With at least 18 barrels accounted for, and using the scan data as a guide, the survey team can calculate where the others are.
We believe that most of the other barrels are actually on board the ferry still, underneath turned over carriages.
That's about half a ton of heavy water. Enough to be a vital missing component for the Nazis' nuclear reactor.
After the war, those involved in the German nuclear program said that the loss of the heavy water was absolutely decisive and stopped their reactor program in its tracks.
Nazi secret weapons are deployed across the globe, including the Indian Ocean. Draining the waters here, off the coast of Western Australia, reveals 2 shattered wrecks. What appears to be a German merchant ship and HMAS Sydney. This mighty Australian warship disappears in November 1941. Will draining HMAS Sydney uncover the mystery of what happened in the national disaster?
For the Australians, the loss of the Sydney almost became something like a national trauma. It was the pride of the Australian Navy. Not knowing about her final resting place and the fate of her crew puzzled the Australians for decades.
After the war, a German captain, Theodor Detmers, claims to have defeated the Sydney in battle. Few Australians trust the German captain's account. He had abandoned his ship, the Cormoran, which was reportedly nothing more than a cargo vessel. And there was no evidence of a battle. The only way to know for sure is to find both ships. The vessel Geosounder begins a remarkable search off the coast of Western Australia. Equipped with new scanning technology and supported by the Australian government, the expedition is led by one of the world's top wreck hunters, David Mearns.
The atmosphere was very tense, very pressured. I had to locate not just one ship, but 2 ships.
The search area is huge. But amazingly, the captain of the Cormoran left an account containing vital clues to where his ship went down. Mearns homes in on an area 125 miles off the coast.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
This is exactly what you're looking for.
After 12 days at sea, a sign.
Here we go.
Here's the rest. Yeah. There it is, the shadow. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Just as Mearns hoped, by using the captain's account as a guide, he's found the Cormoran. Is he close to finding the Sydney, too?
Everything all up there.
Just 4 days later, the missing warship comes into view.
It came up on the screen suddenly, and we knew immediately that was the Sydney. It was just total elation that we had found it. We got it. That's it. That's HMAS Sydney.
At a depth of 1.5 miles, it's too deep to dive, so an ROV explores the wreck site.
Run it. There's a gun. It's it.
That's the one.
Oh, stop right
That's
there.
it.
Wow. Oh, look at that.
Among the ruins of a savage fight to the death are chilling reminders of this ship as a war grave for 645 men. But the underwater ROV camera only gives us glimpses of the sunken ships. Now, by combining the scan data with computer-generated imagery, it's possible to drain the Indian Ocean. This is the HMAS Sydney, the pride of a nation. Visible for the first time in over 70 years. The warship is pockmarked by battle damage, clear evidence of an epic close-quarters firefight. Now, using evidence from the seabed, it's possible to reconstruct a remarkable struggle between the two lost ships and show a Nazi secret weapon in action. Draining the Indian Ocean reveals the lost Australian warship, HMAS Sydney. But how did such a powerful vessel fall victim to an ordinary merchant ship? The Cormoran captain's account offers some clues.
Der 19. November war Bußtag. It was November 19th, 1941. A beautiful day with warm sunshine. As so often in the Indian Ocean, the visibility was perfect.
Suddenly, at 4 p.m., the two ships eye each other on the horizon, 16 miles apart. The Cormoran signals that it's an innocent Dutch freighter. But as the Sydney moves in for a closer inspection, the Cormoran prepares to unleash its deadly secrets. The Nazi captain knows his only chance is to lure the warship into a close-quarters fight.
Jeder Meter weniger brachte sie zur Besserung. A letter come closer still. Langsam. Slowly. Langsam. Slowly.
Then, the Cormoran plays its trick. It appears to be an unarmed merchant vessel. But in reality, the Nazi ship is packed with the kind of deadly technology that Q might have created for James Bond.
The Cormoran's mission in the Indian Ocean was to prey on Allied shipping. It was very much hit-and-run tactics.
Unaware of the Cormoran's true identity, the Sydney moves in closer.
The two ships were about 1,000 meters apart. Well, that's basically point-blank range.
Der Gegner lief jetzt in die. The enemy cruiser was now coming within the range that I considered suitable for my guns. I gave the order and Tarnum. Decamouflage. The Dutch flag was hauled down and the German war flag ran up.
According to the rules of war, concealed weapons are perfectly legal, but only if the ship reveals its true colors before firing. With the wreck of HMAS Sydney now drained of seawater, the first shocking evidence caused by Cormoran's hidden weapons can be seen in the clear light of day. The top of the captain's bridge, the command center of the ship, is missing. But why? On the Cormoran, hidden from view, a repurposed Army anti-tank gun emerges and fires, shattering the Australian captain's bridge.
The command structure of Sydney would have been wiped out in the first opening shot of the battle.
Rapid-fire anti-aircraft guns now rise up on hydraulic ramps, cutting down the Sydney's crew. On the Sydney's main forward gun turrets, the tops have been blown off. And there's a blast hole in the middle of one of the guns. What causes this? Despite its innocent appearance, the Cormoran carries very heavy weapons, perfect for close-range combat. At the push of a button, counterweighted panels lift up to reveal these powerful guns. At virtually point-blank range, their overwhelming firepower knocks out Sydney's forward gun turrets.
It's probable that those guns were taken out in the first 10 seconds, 15 seconds of the action.
Although caught by surprise, the Sydney is still able to return fire and hits the Cormoran's engine room, setting it ablaze. The Nazi ship now prepares its sledgehammer blow. Underneath the waterline lie 2 concealed torpedo tubes, and there are 4 more above the water, each hidden by a steel flap. It takes the Cormoran's crew just 32 seconds to prepare and fire a torpedo.
They inflicted a great deal of damage very quickly on the Australian cruiser. Guns firing, the shells exploding. I mean, it's absolute mayhem, hell on earth.
They were just being wiped out. It would have been absolute carnage.
6:25 p.m. Confident that the Sydney is fatally wounded and most of the crew already dead, the Nazi captain ceases fire. Victory.
Was in der Seekriegsgeschichte noch nicht. Never before in naval history had an armed merchant vessel defeated a cruiser in open battle.
Draining the water away from HMAS Sydney means crucial evidence of what caused its final death blow can now be seen. A 90-foot section of its hull is missing. The Cormoran's torpedoes caused critical damage and a huge explosion. The Sydney's entire bow breaks off, causing the whole ship to plunge 1.5 miles down, with 645 men on board.
Sydney disappears entirely. There are no survivors. It's the most serious loss in the Australian Navy's history. Now we've found the wreck, we know what happened, and now we have an accurate idea of what happened to the ship.
But if the Sydney was defeated, why is the German raider also at the bottom of the Indian Ocean? There's a clue in the original scans of the seafloor. Near the wreck is evidence of a debris field caused by a massive blast. What happened to sink the Cormoran? The Nazi ship sails away victorious, but it's been mortally wounded in the battle.
With the Cormoran's engines broken down, a huge fire on board, and a number of mines in the hold, which were highly explosive, Commander Detmers had no choice whatsoever but to abandon ship.
Hitler has similar merchant raiders, just like the Cormoran. To stop the ship's many secrets from being discovered, the crew then blow up their own vessel. Today, the 2 ships still lie just 13 miles apart on the seabed.
In dem Bewusstsein, dass die ewige Flucht der Erscheinungen
The world's oceans hide Nazi secrets deep underwater. The Baltic Sea. Draining the icy waters here reveals a forgotten German aircraft carrier that never saw battle. Graf Zeppelin. It disappeared more than 70 years ago. Why is Hitler's only aircraft carrier lying heavily damaged at the bottom of the Baltic Sea? For decades, the ultimate fate of the Nazis' only aircraft carrier is a mystery. But then an oil survey vessel begins scanning the Baltic Sea.
First of all, we came across something that piqued our interest. We found it using a multi-beam sonar. After post-processing, the first measurements indicate that it's about 260 meters long.
It's the largest wreck ever found in the Baltic.
Wow!
It was a really big find. It was really spectacular.
Now, diver and historian Stephen Burke is in the Baltic to investigate the monster of the deep, the Graf Zeppelin.
When I first learned about the Graf Zeppelin, nothing was known as to what happened to it at the end of the war. What happened after that was a complete mystery. I made it my mission to go out and find what the fate of the ship had been.
In the darkness, nearly 290 feet down, there are only glimpses of the lost giant. Timber decking on the flight deck. Massive chains from one of the anchors. At 850 feet long, could its massive size be the very reason why this mighty vessel never played a full part in the war? December 1938, Kiel, Germany.
Hitler loved launching large warships. He took great pleasure in it. He saw them as great national symbols.
Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe, is master of ceremonies.
Der erste deutsche Flugzeugträger soll auf Befehl des Führers Graf Zeppelin heißen.
The Nazis had huge ambitions for the vessel. More than 40 fighters, bombers, and torpedo aircraft would have made it a mighty war machine. Elevators would carry aircraft from the lower deck up to the flight deck. Planes would launch by catapult.
The thought of Stukas taking off from an aircraft carrier, carrying out torpedo and dive bombing attacks on Allied ships, it would have greatly strengthened their naval position.
Winston Churchill sees the Nazi aircraft carrier as a priority target.
The British were very concerned that the Germans would complete the Graf Zeppelin. There was a significant threat.
But the Nazis are slow to finish this vast warship. Though launched and seaworthy, final work is delayed time and time again because it needs huge amounts of construction material.
Contrary to appearances, Germany was very short of resources. She was very short of steel. Because it was thought the war would be short, then it was thought that the Graf Zeppelin might not be complete in time to take part in the war. So they had to stop building large warships.
February 1945. The Nazis face defeat.
In early 1945, Admiral Dönitz issued a scorched earth policy, which was that they were to destroy certain key assets to prevent them falling into Russian hands. And one of those assets was the Graf Zeppelin.
The Graf Zeppelin is scuttled by a German wrecking crew, never to see battle. But that isn't the end of the story. It was abandoned on the River Oder, but now it rests 200 miles away in the middle of the Baltic. Why is the Graf Zeppelin here? After the war, the Russians seized the vessel as booty.
The Russians raised it, so they sealed the holes, they pumped the water out and floated the ship.
Then they decided to use the Graf Zeppelin for a unique Cold War experiment. Stephen Burke visits the Polish Naval Academy in Gdynia to investigate. He's working with former Polish naval officer Adam Olejnik.
We have a picture, a lot of damage from different military materials.
Stephen's looking for clues to explain the ship's final moments.
There's less damage.
Less damage.
Less damage on the port side.
Yes.
Okay. And this was the aircraft.
Adam is part of a Polish Navy team which positively identified the Graf Zeppelin.
The enormity of this vessel was a surprise. It's hard to imagine if you haven't seen it before.
They used the mapping technology to scan the wreck. By using the detailed sonar scans. Now, for the first time in over 70 years, evidence of the Graf Zeppelin's final moments can be seen. Emptying the Baltic Sea of water reveals an incredible sight. The 850-foot-long drowned Leviathan. The wreck clearly shows extensive damage caused by explosives, including a large 100-foot hole in the deck.
It looked like the result of bombing.
The hole wasn't there when the Germans abandoned the ship. So what caused it? In August 1947, the Russians want to see how much punishment the Graf Zeppelin could take before it sinks.
So they planted a series of bombs inside the wreck. 2,000-kilo bombs that are detonated on the flight deck. They then sent in a series of waves of aircraft to attack the ship with bombs. Of over 90 dropped, only 5 or 6 hit.
The Soviets have no aircraft carrier of their own. So by bombing the Graf Zeppelin, they learned a lot about their potential new enemies, the British and the Americans.
Sinking the Graf Zeppelin showed the Russian that aircraft carriers were not necessarily as easy to sink as they might have thought. They wanted to find out how you sank them, and they did.
Die uns zusammenführte im Kampfe ringen und groß werden ließ.
Nazi secret technology reached around the world, and draining the oceans reveals evidence of it in the most surprising places. The English Channel. The grave of a remarkable vessel equipped with a secret technology that could have changed the course of the war. Draining the oceans here reveals the mystery of the Nazi U-boat U-480.
U-480, you could call it the first stealth submarine in history.
This vessel vanished in 1945, carrying a lethal secret technology. What made this killer Nazi sub invisible? August 1944. The D-Day landings in France have put Nazi Germany in peril.
In August 1944, the situation for the German U-boats in the British Channel was rather grim, because it was one of the best defended areas around the British Isles.
The Allies have a highly effective method for hunting the submarine raiders. sonar. Earlier in the war, the Nazi U-boats savaged Allied shipping in the Battle of the Atlantic, largely by hunting in packs on the surface, where sonar is of limited use. But by 1944, heavy surface patrols forced the U-boats to operate completely underwater, making them much more vulnerable to Allied sonar.
This isn't wolfpack warfare against convoys. It's individual submarines stalking individual ships.
Operations in a submarine in the English Channel at that time were extremely dangerous. Your chances of survival if you're the commander of a U-boat are about 50-50.
The Nazis want to counter the threat of sonar.
The German answer to sonar detection was developing some kind of cloak of invisibility.
By August 21st, 1944, Hitler's designers have achieved their dream of stealth technology. U-boat captain Hans Joachim Förster and his crew lie in wait, deep in the English Channel. And the Allies never realize he's there.
It's unprecedented. He gets into the English Channel, and in 5 days, he sinks 4 ships. And he gets out. It's the most devastating patrol carried out into the Channel up to that time. It's quite remarkable.
Will draining the waters of the English Channel help explain this Nazi secret? Underwater archaeologist Innes McCartney investigates reports of a U-boat wreck about 20 miles off the coast of southern England, hidden 200 feet down.
When you hit the water and you put your hand on the downline and you're swimming down to the wreck, the sense of anticipation is just truly incredible. Your first interaction with this completely unseen object is, can you work out what it is?
Now, for the first time, the waters in the English Channel drain away and bring U-480 into the clear light of day. The secret of the stealth submarine is revealed. The entire surface of the U-boat is covered with rubber panels. Each panel has a series of tiny regular holes. Instead of reflecting sonar signals back to an Allied warship, these rubber panels absorb them, making it effectively invisible.
I put my hand on a black rubber panel, and I was like, I don't believe what I've just seen.
Diminishing the effectiveness of the other side's sonar could well make the difference between life and death.
Today, in Kiel, Germany, one of U-480's sister boats still survives.
U-480 wasn't a particular new design. It was the basic Type 7 U-boat, only covered with this special cloaking device.
But draining U-480 raises another critical question. If it was undetectable, why is U-480 at the bottom of the English Channel? Removing all the water means that clues to the damage done to U-480 can now be revealed. It has sustained a critical blow. The stern section is broken off, and there's a hole in the pressure hull. What caused such devastating damage? Faced with a modern high-tech threat, the Allies resort to a very old-fashioned response. Mines.
The trap that U-480 fell victim to was a secret minefield.
February 1945. Shipping lanes crisscross the channel. But all Allied vessels are secretly warned not to travel in a specific shipping lane area. And unknown to the U-boat crew, the British lay what's called a deep trap minefield, far below the surface. Then wait.
U-482 returned to what had been its old hunting grounds, expecting to find some more targets. The navigational buoys were there, so it seemed as if the route was still being used. In fact, it wasn't. The British were laying minefields, and these came as a very nasty surprise.
It was like the exact point they knew U-480 was going. Targeted killing based on intelligence. That's why you keep it secret. You're blind. Terrifying. £320 of explosive bursts a hole in the submarine, letting in tons of water per second. There is no chance of escape. The secret stealth technology was years ahead of its time. But in the end, even its special cloak of invisibility could not save U-480 from the victorious Allies. The Nazis lost World War II. But the deadly secrets they left behind under the world's oceans are a reminder of the extraordinary courage of the men and women who brought the Nazis down. Cold War killing machines and lethal nuclear weapons abandoned under our oceans.
The thought that these doomsday weapons lie down there in the depths is frightening.
The terrifying reality has been hidden. The keys to the truth of the Cold War lost under icy waters for over half a century. Imagine if we could empty the oceans, letting the water drain away to reveal the secrets of the seafloor. Now we can, using accurate data and astonishing technology, to bring light once again to a lost world. How did the Cold War's most advanced submarine end up shattered on the seafloor?
A giant hand had just crushed it.
How close does America come to accidentally nuking Europe?
There was this terrible explosion. Big ball of flame.
And who stole parts of a secret Soviet submarine? October 1962. The United States and the Soviet Union hit crisis point.
This is a red alert. Repeat.
Moscow installs nuclear missiles in Cuba. President Kennedy issues an ultimatum. Withdraw the missiles, or it's war.
A full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
31,000 nuclear devices. If it starts, the world would go up in smoke. That's it. Crazy.
The Soviets back off. But the world remains just one mistake away from nuclear apocalypse. Many flashpoints are hidden from view, shrouded in secrecy. Now we can reveal just how close we came to disaster. In the waters of Northern California, a mysterious wreck could reveal the truth about top-secret experiments at the dawn of the Cold War. A giant object has been detected under these waters. Maritime archaeologist Dr. James Delgado wants to know more.
Mapping the seabed outside the Golden Gate, they found a big target, a very big target. Was it a ship? Was it something more? What brought this here? Why is it on the bottom?
James hopes the new find could solve a Cold War mystery. The location of a ship lost for over 60 years. USS Independence, a giant aircraft carrier.
Imagine the wreck of an aircraft carrier as big as this, sitting on the bottom, just off the coast of San Francisco, unrevealed for so many years. It's powerful, it's compelling.
He sets out to explore the site with his team, sending a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, 2,600 feet down. A submerged beast.
You gotta go a little further, brother. A little more to the left. This is an area where we would have had the name painted. There's the E. Independence! You can see it! E-N-C-E! Yes! Yes!
This carrier is a hero of the Second World War. It battled to recapture Pacific Islands from the Japanese. It survived all that. But it hasn't been seen for over half a century. Why is it now sitting in an unmarked location at the bottom of these cool coastal waters? Using precision scan data, the waters roll back to reveal a staggering sight. A World War II colossus. It looks almost new, but on the flight deck, there's evidence of damage. The surface torn, buckled, and bent. And one giant corner punched in completely. On the hull, strange scars. Steel plate creased like tinfoil. On the control tower, eerie details. Japanese flags were painted on this kill board for every enemy unit destroyed. But now, only white paint remains.
Now, this should be painted in different colors. It should be red, for example, but it's not here, and that's not age or seawater.
What could have caused such bizarre damage? James picks up on a trail of evidence that leads him all the way to the fiery dawn of the Cold War. Bikini Atoll, July 1946. Behind a ring of low-rise islands, nearly 100 obsolete warships lie empty and abandoned. One of them is the USS Independence. This remote Pacific lagoon is America's new atomic test arena. It's less than a year since the first ever atom bomb attacks on Japan ended the Second World War. And the US needs to know more about what these terrifying new weapons can do. On July 25th at 8:35 a.m., the first ever test of an atom bomb underwater. 2 million tons of radioactive seawater blasted into the air.
The bomb punches out of the lagoon with a heated core hotter than the sun shooting up through the heart of it.
Also, an airborne detonation as big as the bomb at Nagasaki. A mile and a half from the epicenter is the USS Independence. A blinding flash irradiates her, instantly vaporizing the red paint on the killboard.
The burst, not only of light but heat, took away all the other colors, leaving only the white base coat.
Then, blast waves rocked the carrier, shredding her flight deck and washboarding the steel around her hull.
This is all of those thousands of pounds of air or water coming right up alongside the ship and slamming into it, bending it, denting it, rippling it. This is what an atomic bomb does to a ship.
The many warships destroyed at Bikini carry a message. This is the future of warfare. With the Soviet Union working around the clock on an atom bomb of its own, an arms race like no other will dominate the decades to come. The drained wreck of USS Independence can tell us more of this shadowy confrontation. But first, we need to know, why does she lie not close to Bikini, but California? Hidden under the waters of Northern California, the wreck of the USS Independence. 4,500 miles away from where she was smashed by atomic blasts at Bikini Atoll. How did she get here? And why? Can our immense drained wreck provide a clue?
When you look at all the damage brought by the atomic bomb, while grievous, for the most part is above the waterline, it wasn't enough to sink the ship.
The Independence survives the atomic blasts. But she's ravaged by radiation.
It had been coated in radioactive steam. There's a near panic that the radiation levels have not subsided much at all.
In the summer of 1947, the Independence is towed to California. James Delgado and his team want to know why.
This was here for a couple of years.
They discover a link to a top-secret naval research facility on the fringes of San Francisco. Hunters Point. Inside the high-security port, a specialist team studies the radioactive fallout on board Independence. Their mission: design a defense against nuclear weapons.
The key lessons underscored by study of Independence is to just get scarier, to build more weapons, to bring more of them into play. In short, proliferation.
But a question remains. After almost 4 years at Hunter's Point, the U.S. Navy scuttles Independence. And the wreck is nowhere near where contemporary news stories claim she is.
We found it only 30 miles offshore, more than 100 miles away from where reports said Independence had gone down, which stunned us, and we began to think, why?
Off the waters of Northern California, James goes deep inside the Independence to look for answers.
As the robot drops down, I have it zoom in again and again until finally I see exactly what they're hiding.
Now, using precision data, we can reveal what he finds there. In the hangar, tucked behind a Hellcat fighter plane, a stack of large, sealed barrels. On one barrel, a side panel has rusted away. And when James inspects it up close, something catches his eye.
Those are rubber gloves. Looking at it, everything from the labs is getting packed in barrels, sealed in concrete.
Not only from Hunter's Point, but from the labs in and around the Bay Area.
They wanted to put these away, out of the sight of prying eyes, beyond the reach of Soviet spies.
They're afraid of espionage.
The U.S. Navy decides to take no chances, whether Soviet spies are operating in California or not.
What better thing to do then with your atomic secrets than to put them inside this big carrier in a location with all these nuclear secrets entombed within it?
The battered wreck of the Independence still lies off the California coast. A chilling reminder of the dawn of the Cold War. In the years that follow, the two superpowers build huge nuclear arsenals. And sometimes accidents happen. The coast of Almeria, southern Spain. Draining these waters reveals a shocking sight. A nuclear warhead, more powerful than 1 million tons of TNT. How does it get here? And how close is Spain to a nuclear disaster? Joe Ramirez is serving with American forces here in the 1960s. It's the height of the Cold War, and the U.S. is flying nuclear armed patrols over Europe around the clock.
Operation Chrome Dome, as it was called. B-52 bombers, each carrying 4 hydrogen bombs, in flight 24 hours a day.
Chrome Dome maintains a constant nuclear threat against the Soviet bloc. But to keep the bombers airborne for as long as possible, crews must refuel in midair. A delicate and dangerous procedure. On January 17, 1966, in the skies over Spain, something sparks an explosion. 4 bombs, complete with nuclear warheads, hurtle towards the ground. 2 without their parachutes. The nuclear components are unarmed, but the conventional explosives do detonate, spreading radioactive plutonium over a square mile. Hundreds of American and Spanish personnel scour the countryside and find 3 of the bombs. But that's all.
We couldn't find the 4th one.
The US military needs to locate their lost nuke before it leaks dangerous radiation or falls into the hands of the Soviets. After more than a week of searching, the team still can't find the bomb. Then, Ramirez meets a local fisherman. He reports seeing a parachute fall into the sea on the day of the accident.
It hit me. We're looking in the wrong place. We're looking for the bomb on land. This bomb may be in the water.
But if the nuke is under the ocean, where is it? And what condition is it in? In the last few years, Spanish oceanographers have mapped the Mediterranean seafloor.
The bottom of the oceans is dark, but thanks to acoustical techniques, we can see all the particular features with an incredible high resolution of the seabed of the oceans.
Now, with access to Dr. Rivera's data, we can drain the waters of southern Spain, exactly as it looked in 1966, and remove the sea from an American nuclear calamity. The lost nuke, 2,500 feet down, teetering on a cliff edge. A state-of-the-art hydrogen bomb, 100 times more powerful than the one that destroyed Hiroshima. The nose cone dented, but the bomb itself still intact. The Americans need to find it first, to get it away from this densely populated coastline, and to stop the Soviets from salvaging it for themselves. American ships and divers scour the Spanish Mediterranean, looking for a lost nuke. They search miles of dark seabed for almost 2 months, but find nothing.
You can imagine what it's like feeling your way around there trying to find an atomic bomb.
Then, on March 15th, 1966, a remotely controlled submersible finally spots something.
When the announcement came through, I said, "Phew."
The submersible attaches a rope, but as they carefully attempt to winch the bomb to the surface, the rope suddenly snaps. All the US Navy can do is wait for it to hit the bottom. The fail-safe system holds, and there's no chance of a detonation. But a nuclear weapon full of plutonium is lost once again. Now, using the latest data, we can drain the Mediterranean completely to reveal where it falls. A huge sea canyon opens up, nearly 3,000 feet deep. And right at the bottom, the nuclear bomb. The difficult rescue attempt has just become near impossible.
One of the Air Force colonels said if somebody had sat down and thought about a way to lose a hydrogen bomb, they couldn't have thought of anything more devilish.
Finally, the Navy sends a cable-controlled robot down into the canyon and use it to grab the nuke. But it snags on the bomb's parachute. It's now completely stuck, half a mile under the sea. The only way to retrieve the nuke is to haul the robot up and drag the parachute and bomb along with it. A delicate daisy chain for a 2-ton nuclear weapon.
The man leading the mission actually fainted from the tension.
Miraculously, the chain holds. These are 2 of the 4 thermonuclear bombs dropped on Spain. On the left, the nuke that journeyed to the bottom of the sea. Now safely stored in New Mexico.
To just see it lying there, this item contained the power to destroy a city. It's scary, you know?
A Cold War catastrophe is avoided. But Operation Chrome Dome is suspended 2 years later. Nuclear confrontation has moved beneath the waves. 200 miles off the coast of New England. Draining the waters of the Atlantic exposes the horrors of a deep-sea disaster. By the 1960s, the Cold War has a new front line. Submarines armed with nuclear weapons try to creep into enemy waters. America deploys hunter-killer subs to guard against the threat. The very latest is the USS Thresher, powered by a nuclear reactor. On April 9th, 1963, Thresher sets out from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, for sea trials. Just over 200 miles out, it begins trialing extreme deep-water dives.
Thresher was pushing boundaries under the ocean. The men who served on her are very similar to space astronauts.
A U.S. Navy ship called Skylark is in attendance. A few hours into the trial, the captain of Thresher sends out a call, saying the sub is experiencing minor difficulties. Then, fragments of a garbled message, a loud hiss, and silence.
The staff aboard Skylark is not quite sure what has happened and continue to call to them and ask them to respond. They continue to do that for some period.
Thresher never makes contact and never resurfaces. Lori Arsenault is 8 years old when the sub goes missing.
We were watching TV, and there was a news flash. A Navy ship was missing. My brother went running out into the kitchen. By the time I got there, everyone was crying, and I didn't know why. But I just started crying, and then little by little, I found out that my dad was on that boat.
In 1985, deep-sea explorer Dr. Bob Ballard sets out to find the wreck of the Titanic. But his famous expedition is a Cold War cover story. In fact, Ballard is on a top-secret mission to investigate the wreck of the USS Thresher.
I was a trained naval intelligence officer. The Soviets could track me with Sally. So we needed a cover.
Ballard deploys a submersible equipped with video cameras. the once classified footage shows images of jagged metal. Ballard's first glimpse of what's left of the lost submarine. The only way to understand the scale of the wreck is to see it in the light of day. A traumatic scene. The sub is ripped into mangled pieces and scattered across the seafloor. Water drips off a torn rudder, and lying behind it, the conning tower on its side. There's a blasted air canister, and finally, fragments of piping. Little else is identifiable.
So what we're seeing here is the debris field of the Thresher, but it's completely shredded. This is carnage. The only big piece was a piece of the tail. And even that looked like a giant hand had just crushed it. So it was everywhere.
How did the USS Thresher end up like this? It wasn't carrying munitions. Its nuclear reactor isn't explosive. And there's no evidence of a Soviet attack. Ballard believes that only a force of nature can explain the damage.
Pressure is a deadly force, so we have a lot of experience with things really blowing up.
If a sub goes too deep, the pressure of the ocean becomes overwhelming. The whole structure will suddenly fail and implode.
An implosion is a gigantic explosion.
It's known as crush depth. But why would the Thresher be so deep? Ballard searches the wreck looking for clues. In the vast field of scattered wreckage, bent pieces of piping litter the seafloor. Some of these pipes would have carried water into the sub from the sea outside to cool the reactor. And during deep dives, they become highly pressurized. Ballard knows a leak from any of these pipes could trigger a shutdown in the nuclear reactor.
When it comes in like a jet. And it can atomize and form a cloud, so it's just really coming in. When that happens, the nuclear reactor automatically scrams.
He digs back into U.S. Navy files and uncovers a survey of the Thresher's cooling pipes. The report reveals that some of the pipe joints are weak and failed testing. The message from Thresher about difficulties now makes sense. At 2,200 feet below, the sub springs a super high-pressure leak.
It makes a really nasty noise, sounds really high-pitched. It would just go through you like a knife.
The reactor power cuts out. The sub begins to fill with water.
They can't drive out. They're dead in the water.
But Thresher should still survive. Studying the wreck, Ballard can see components of a crucial buoyancy system. Compressed air canisters. If the sub needs to surface, the canisters blow into ballast chambers, and the buoyancy propels it upwards. So why didn't the Thresher do that? The U.S. Navy conducts an investigation. What they find
is chilling. In the cold conditions of the Thresher's deep-sea dive, moisture in the compressed air freezes and blocks the ballast.
So it's froze over. They couldn't blow.
The hiss in the captain's final message is the crew trying and failing to blow the ballast. The shocking discovery completes the story of the last moments of the USS Thresher. At the bottom of its deep dive, a powerful leak kills the engines, and the icy deep freezes and blocks the ballast pipes. Without power and buoyancy, and partially full of seawater, the Thresher is dragged deeper and deeper.
And they are now taking on water. It's exceeding collapse depth. They have no way on.
The hull creaks and groans. The crew knows they are reaching crush depth.
They're just going down, they're getting deeper, and they're crushing. And that is a tough way to die because there's just nothing you can do.
At 2,400 feet below, the pressure is 70 times greater than at the surface.
And when that went, it just destroyed the submarine.
It'll just crush you like you're not even there.
From above, the full terrifying power of that monumental implosion is clear. The wreck has been blasted across 4 square miles of ocean.
The first time I ever saw the pictures of the wreck, it was a profound and powerful experience. The Cold War was not a war without casualties.
Americans are not the only ones to lose their lives. Beneath the wild waters of the northern Pacific lie the remains of another submarine. How does a Soviet wonder weapon fall victim to Cold War power games? On February 24th, 1968, a Soviet submarine leaves port in eastern Russia. K-129's mission is to
arrays.
In 1968, the Americans use acoustic technology to try and find K-129. Noticing the Soviets' frantic search, they scanned back over their data, looking for a marker. And identify something far out in the Pacific. Analysis suggests it could be an underwater detonation. Have they found the sound of the explosion that blasts K-129 into pieces?
Sound can travel underwater, literally halfway around the world. So in the case of a submarine explosion, that would be a pretty obvious signal.
If there was an explosion, to this day, no one knows what caused it. But by triangulating the noise across the network, the U.S. Navy can pinpoint where the sound comes from. Here, 1,500 miles northwest of Hawaii. For the U.S. military, a Soviet sub loaded with nuclear missiles is a priceless bounty. But attempting to seize K-129 would be an act of war.
You can't just take stuff that belongs to another military. There was real risk that going after this thing could start a war.
The U.S. Navy closes the file and leaves the wreck untouched. But someone does tamper with K-129 and its nuclear missiles. And the evidence is in the wreck. Some experts think that K-129 is probably destroyed by an internal explosion deep under the Pacific Ocean, and there's evidence for this theory on the drained wreck. But there's something else too. Signs that something more than an explosion happens here. At the front, there's no trace of the jagged remains typically produced by an explosion. And the nose itself is missing, cleanly sliced off. How could that have happened? Investigative journalist Josh Dean is determined to find out.
I think there are pieces of the K-129 out there somewhere. It's been lost for some reason, and lost is never good.
Dean has been passed video, shot in 1974 on board a ship called the Glomar Explorer. Owned by eccentric American billionaire Howard Hughes, the Glomar claims to be a deep-sea mining vessel. But the video reveals something straight out of a James Bond movie.
It's mind-boggling. It's remarkable to see today. That's footage that's never been released before.
Hidden within the Glomar Explorer is a giant cavity and a hydraulic claw. The men on board are CIA operatives. Operation codename Project Azorian. Their mission is to recover sections of K-129, and especially its nuclear missiles, 6 years after the sub went down.
Even most people within the CIA were not aware of the existence of this program. The stakes could not be higher, essentially.
The claw is designed to drop down through 3 miles of ocean and retrieve the sub and its nuclear missiles. In the murky 45-year-old video, it's possible to see it, down in the deep, preparing to grasp a part of K-129. It pulls a 2,000-ton section away from the seabed and begins an agonizing 3-day-long ascent to the ship. 2 days into winching, on the surface,
there's a sudden jolt.
Those engineers who'd spent a lot of time on boats thought, like, we definitely just dropped some weight. Something happened.
Stressed from digging into seafloor, one of the claws has cracked open. Only the tip of the nose remains. Most of what was in the claw, including the nuclear missiles, plunges back into the darkness.
The guys on the ship have to sit there and say, look, we can't try again. The claw is broken.
The CIA is forced to abandon the operation. The dropped sub is still on the floor of the Pacific today, along with its nuclear weapons. Nobody knows how many more Soviet warheads are lost in our oceans. The US admits that 6 of its nuclear weapons are unrecovered, left behind by a conflict that abruptly ends in 1989.
Gorbachev said, we have tried to kill your submarines. We have failed. We quit.
The Soviet regime collapses. But the scars of the Cold War remain beneath our oceans. Nuclear weapons and radioactive waste litter the sea. Now, the superpowers are rearming with thousands of new missiles that can strike across the globe. Secret nuclear power games continue day and night.